never know who takes control of. Thank you so much for the gift subs on Kick. You guys can stop now. You don't have to, but it is no longer required. And in fact, I'm going to update the title so you guys don't feel pressured either. I'm going to update the title so there's no pressure as well. Good memes, debate review, and more. I'm going to do it so that you guys don't feel the pressure. Thank you so much. We're updating this so there's no pressure. No pressure. Okay. Why don't we get, I'm going to give them a little bit of time just to confirm the streams are up. And so I'll do a be right back. We'll listen to a little bit of music for like 2 minutes, and then I'll get right into the little bit of inside baseball. So just give me 1 second just to make sure and confirm these are correct, and I'll be right back, okay? We'll put on some music while we wait. But thank you guys so much for making my dreams come true. I really wanted that check mark, and I hope I'm going to get it now, and it's all partially because of you. All right, so Twitch is up. Can someone check YouTube for me? Just see. You will get it. I spoke with Kick CEO. What's the Pornhub live link? All right, so Twitch is definitely up. Cool. Is YouTube up? Oh, I know how I can check. Not yet. Oh, it is. I think it is. All right. Try typing YouTube chat. Try typing. Hell yeah. All right. Sick. Cool. All right, we're up. All right, sick. All right, folks, let's do a little recap. So first, taking a big step back on the Word War debate stuff, I first got the inkling of Word War. A tier 2 sub. And by the way, we have the big Pisco emote for Twitch subs at tier 2. We don't yet have the nice, cool emotes on YouTube just because of they have like an absurdly low emote cap. But we're close to being able to replace some of the old emotes and put in some of the newer emotes that people like more. So just heads up on the YouTube side for memberships. But thank you. There's the big Pisco emote that is for tier 2s. I think it should be available for tier 2. So thank you. All right. Cool. So Word War debate. Oh, look, we have AI Pisco too. If you guys don't know, in all the advertising materials for Word War debate, they made me look like Zoran Mamdani or something. It was so stupid because they were like, can we have a headshot? I was like out and about in New York somewhere, like getting lunch or something, or dinner. I forget when it was. I'm like, yeah, just wait for me to get back to my computer. I can get you a headshot. And they like couldn't wait for me to do that. And so like, oh, don't worry, we're good. I'm like, oh, sick. All right. I guess they must have taken like a screenshot of my stream or something and I don't know, touched it up. And no, they just like invented a new person who doesn't look like me. Wait, maybe I can show you guys the image of it. It's pretty laughably racist. I'm fucking around a little bit, sort of. Let's see. Where's it's pretty wild. And I met the guy who did this and I'm like, why did you do this? He's like, I don't know, man. We didn't have time. We just had to fucking do it. And yeah, we just needed like something that looked really good. And I'm like, no, I mean, okay, dude, but I said it was a meme and I didn't really mind it that much. But here, 1 second, I'll show you guys what it looked like. The guy was so funny, the producer. It might have been the producer also that was with me when Eddie Bravo attacked me. I'm just kidding. He didn't attack me. It's a joke. All right. So on all of the promotional materials, they have me looking like this guy. Who is that? Who the fuck is that? They have like a 30, I don't know what to say, 30-year-old picture. I shouldn't say that. Sorry. This picture from Anna is old too. Like it's an older picture of her. So is this Pearly Davis picture. But there's still pictures of them, you know? The Ryan picture, I don't know if this is AI or real. Like this might be his real headshot that they've touched up with AI. This is not me. This is not what I look like. I don't look like this, dude. Oh. Yeah, who's the guy? The lolly shot. All right, so big step back. I have to restart my whole fucking train of thought. My head is a little foggy because of my illness that I'm suffering with. I hear that they're doing word war debate, and it's going to be where the best go to bang. And how many times did we watch that advertisement they did with Andrew Wilson and Sam Tripoli? And I was like the only left-wing person covering it, right? I was like the only left-wing person covering it, that like this was a thing. And we watched all of their little updates, and we made fun of / thought it was very funny, some of their advertisements. We laughed at the sharing of worldviews, never been done before. We laughed at some of the cinematography because we felt it was a little melodramatic. But all in all, I always expressed that I would love to be a part of it. I always did that, right? And there was something odd, though, that happened, because you had this hunk, Ben Swann, who was the host or the announcer of the word war debate advertisements, but Andrew was the one who was supposed to be doing the moderating. And it turns out, right, Andrew says, moderation is actually like a lost skill. It's very, very difficult to moderate a debate. Turns out that's not the case. Turns out it's not hard at all. Because Ben Swann, either they severely underestimated Ben Swann, or the dude just has sufficient charisma to be able to handle any curveball. And trust me, the Ana Kasparian Pearl showdown had plenty of curveballs for him to have to handle. But I'm getting ahead of ourselves. So Andrew stopped being included in some of the advertisements, and I noticed that Ben Swann was moved from just host to host / moderator. And so for reasons I'm not aware, I don't really know. Like maybe there was just like a time difference, whatever. I'm not gonna speculate as to that, but Andrew's not involved anymore in what's happening. So it's just Sam Tripoli and the Enlightened Network. And the first main card announcement they had was Hannah Pearl Davis. All right, just Pearly Things. They have her as like one of the main cards. And I'm like, that's a little interesting, because I saw them kind of like going after Steven Crowder and like making references to, or Rob was making references to, like maybe they're going to have politicians involved. And so my guess is, listen, there's a lot of money behind this venture. My guess is, but that it is like the first time they're doing it, and so they need like a proof of concept or whatever. And so maybe there were things, and my inclination is that they had other people like fall through because of shit out of their control. And so I'm not trying to say that it's like incompetence or whatever or anything like that. And frankly, I thought all the debates were fun as fuck to watch or / participate in. And I liked the product that they had. I thought it was like you might like roll your eyes, but I had a great time. And the party atmosphere that was promised was delivered actually in the venue. Like that's where the party happened. And it actually was fun to like connect with certain people. Got to be careful though, and I'll tell you why. Anyway, like probably 10 days out, I get the call from Dana White / Rob saying, "Hey, would you like to be involved? We like want to have a more, I don't know what to say, like a meaty political issue, and we want like some people who have at least some experience or some like more, I don't know, formal training perhaps." And I'm like, yeah, sure, dude. But you're asking me to be there a few days early and to do a bunch of stuff. And so, whatever, pay me. So I disclosed that, they did pay me a fee. I'm not going to tell you how much, but yeah, I am disclosing that, and I already did, but I just want to let you know. The ride over to Atlantic City, I took the bus. All was well, and I got there at night. And the next morning, I had my call time, and I met Rob Noir for the first time, trudging along in the casino, because it was like a casino. It's the casino hotel they have at one of the hotels there. And my guy, hang on, what the fuck? Why did this camera just? Why does it do it sometimes? Do it. I met Rob Noir in the flesh. And it was a really awesome moment, because it's like, as I saw him coming towards me, I was like, this guy's going to be like a decent fellow behind the scenes. And he was. I'm not saying he's a different person. I'm not saying that, but he just seemed like an all-American type of guy. He was a bit more gentle and shy / professional, certainly. And like focused on getting the job done kind of deal. So yeah, and we got along great. We were joking. He showed me over to the studio. We walked through it. I did this interview with Ben Swan, and what a charmer this guy is, Ben Swan. Just like a very, very affable person. I don't know what they got these RT hosts drinking over there in the Kremlin, but definitely this guy was good at his job. And he didn't need much direction. So this whole like Andrew is the needed element to have amazing moderation. Like, no. I'm not saying he was like an amazing moderator, but he was not like this child unable to grasp with high concept ideas that people were throwing around. Okay. So all in all, I really enjoyed doing the interview with Ben Swan. I don't think they played it. I thought it was pretty hype. They really seemed happy that I was like kicking Ryan a little bit in that interview with Ben Swan. They might play it in their edits or whatever. And if they do that, we'll cut it up and we'll do an edit into our into my feed as well, so you guys can see it. More attractive in person as well. Yes. So was the sideline reporter was very beautiful too, Crystal. And I have something to say about Crystal as well for the Pearl debate, which was funny. An observation. So yeah, my observations are pretty positive in general. That's not to say that I'm ever going to like keep the heat low in our encounters, or that I'm not going to call him a piece of shit hack when it's required or suited. And I just want people to know that I'm conscious of the fact that meeting people in person, there's a risk of being like charmed and like withholding criticism in the future because you've like met them in person and now there's like a more personal connection. And so I'm conscious and aware of that. And I am actively trying to make sure that is not adversely influencing me from withholding criticism. Okay. So I'm aware of that, and just keep that in mind that I'm like conscious of it. That doesn't mean that I can't fuck up and let my personal feelings about them get in the way, but I will do my best to not do that. Okay, so that's my observations. Good, decent guy. Eventually in the after party we had a beer, or even before that, I think we were like grabbing a beer together, all sick. Kyla was there. Hung out a little bit with Kyla when she did her walkthrough, and then afterwards we had a bite to eat with Nick. Good times, great oldies, all wonderful stuff. And yeah, I was tired, and then I napped I napped for like a few hours after the call time, and after I did all the walkthrough and interview, and then just read a couple other articles, and then chilled in the hotel room for a bit. I think we did that stream that night. So that happened. And then the day of, I go to the black barbershop to get touched up. My beard, I, just grab some coffee and make my way towards the arena. The Proud Boys are there, okay? Enrico Tario is there, Gavin McInnes is there, and other like Proud Boys are there and shit. The people there are conservatives. That's why it's like it's so funny to see Ryan like subtweeting me, not really subtweeting, like going under Ted Cruz and saying things like Pisco defeated, lost the fucking popular vote. Like, we're on the Enlightened Network. Fucking the crowd is filled with a mix of Groypers, hard conservatives, Proud Boys, and maybe 2 liberals. We're on the Enlightened Network. I want to remind you, the money that is coming in is almost certainly, it's conservatives. It's really, really conservative people, incredibly conservative people. And so to see Ryan just tweeting, it's so cringe. The dude is like so unhingedly fucking egotistical that it's frankly a little bit embarrassing. Anna won, so they can't be. Anna won because it was the most single-handed, obvious beatdown in history. Even the conservatives, we'll talk about it, the crowd. The conservatives in the audience were so frustrated with Pearl. Some of them were encouraging, but the debate happens between me and Ryan. We'll go through it for a little bit. We definitely will, and I'll tell you why he got absolutely demolished. It's pathetic what he came prepared with, and if you understand anything about the citizenship clause, it will become immediately apparent to you. There is one, and people have noticed already, there is one huge missed opportunity that I had, that if I had remembered to do this or had thought about it in the moment, it would have been even more brutal than what we saw. So I just want to be clear. I loved the debate. I had so much fun. I was very proud with myself. And I know that you guys said, well, of course you are. But I just felt very proud of myself, and I'll tell you why as we go through it. And afterwards, I wasn't lying. Conservatives came up and said, that was an awesome debate. It was back and forth. Even the conservatives who came up, they were like, I didn't necessarily agree that we should be giving citizenship, but you had a really good point about this, like how they could be used against Trump supporters. In one sense, I kind of roll my eyes because you only care when it can be used to affect you. But the thing is, that was my plan to bring that up, and I'll talk a little bit more about it as we go through the debate a little bit. But I really, really enjoyed my time there, and just Ryan is cringe, but Ryan was great to chill with, and we grabbed coffee and talked for hours while we were in the walkthrough, and then afterwards we spent probably 20 to 25% of the time during the various social events I was spending with Ryan. And so I know I'm talking shit, and I do think that he's being cringe and fucking there are moments of the debate where he's slimy as fuck. I will not hold that back. That absolutely cringe, absolutely slimy, absolutely bad faith, but a decent good guy in person. I didn't watch as much of the second debate. From what I saw, I thought the pro-Israel guy was doing better. He seemed a little bit scared at some of the... Oh, thank you so much for the tier 2. You've just unlocked the big Pisco emote. Big Yoshi in Twitch chat. Thank you so much. And I wish that YouTube had better emote access so we could give some of the Twitch emotes and kick emotes over to YouTube. So it's not because I don't love YouTube. I do love YouTube chat. So it's not that. I promise. Okay. Yeah, low empathy for sure. For sure, Missy. There was I thought the pro-Israel guy was doing a better job, frankly. The audience was probably most chippy with the pro-Israel guy than any, certainly than me. They were actually very respectful of me in a way that they were not respectful of the pro-Israel guy. And he kind of more congregated towards me and Ryan than some of the right-wingers who were in the audience, to be honest. Nick Shirley speaks like the head coach should bench him after a hard hit. Maybe. Okay. So, but yeah, I thought the pro-Israel guy was doing a good job optically for an unbiased audience. I don't think he was doing that good optically for a biased audience who was already kind of like on the side of the View here. Especially the moments where he was like, it's not pronounced Amalek, it's Amalek, or whatever. I don't even know the pronunciation. Do you even speak Hebrew? Like those kinds of things. Even though if someone else said them in a different crowd, they'd probably be zingers. I don't think it was pretty smart optically in the crowd itself. And I think that there was legitimately some dispute about, well, obviously mine was rigged too, but their vote was also rigged, I think. Or at least that's an allegation that was made in favor of the pro-Israel guy. That's what the producers, or I think some of the producers were saying, which is pretty funny. Okay. In between that debate and the final debate, there was like a mid party and then like an after party. So big picture stuff. A lot of nice people. A lot of like, or some famous people there too. I will say I met Anna. And Anna was very like gracious in person, very nice. It was really like, I was a little bit taken aback because she like recognized me and said to me, it's good to meet you, Pisco. Hi, Pisco. And I was like, I've talked some obviously like some shit about Anna, but she didn't hold a grudge about it, which is I think very like professional of her. And it's like it immediately changed my perspective on, at least I always had this impression that she was like maybe a bit unhinged at times, and maybe that still could be true in certain debate moments, but the fact that she, given the criticism and the back and forth we've had on Twitter, for example, that she was like not holding a grudge at all, like just plainly very like nice person, and like came up to me to like greet me and say hi and to meet me. I thought I was taken aback a bit. I was like a little bit surprised that she recognized me. I thought that she did a really good job in the debate, as we'll see. And yeah, very positive interaction. Again, I don't want to like claim that we'll agree on everything, but and that obviously won't happen if you know my content, but I'm just telling you, just like Rob Noor, very positive interactions. The interactions I had with Anna like were very amicable, very positive. She seemed like a really like, and this was, I was even more shocked by it because she was so brutal against Pearl. So it was both the fact that like you recognize me at all, but also that you were like just like in the mode that we know you for, which is kind of like take no prisoners mode. It was a bit shocking, and I was like, oh, okay, so you're a professional. I was obviously like buying into the kayfabe a little bit, and that's a little bit on me to buy into the like to think that she couldn't like put aside the political disagreement and that it would be all personal, that kind of stuff, and it wasn't at all that way. So yeah, that's my take on it. Very, very positive. And her friend was very lovely as well, very like gracious, very supporting her. I think she might even reference her in the debate itself. But yeah, even like the people who were out there, and we'll get to that in a little second because I want to talk about Eddie Bravo just for a little bit. I'm not revealing like everything that's said or anything, but just the kind of general demeanor of people. At one point in the conversation with a producer, I realized that he supports flat Earth, and it took me like a minute to like for it to click. I'm like, oh, we're about to have a flat Earth conversation. And Eddie Bravo was kind of like lurking nearby. Do you guys know who Eddie Bravo is? The crowd eventually filled in more from when it started. It was never like a huge amount, but I thought the numbers were pretty decent for online for given the size of their platform. It's not like they probably like made their money back at all with ticket sales, but it's like the first of this like thing. And I actually thought it was to participate in. It was so much fun. I just have to be honest. And the social stuff was, even though I probably got sick based on it. Yeah. So Eddie Bravo, the producer is talking to me, and I'm like, I just got a shot with the producer, and he's getting into like flat Earth stuff, and I'm like, oh, did you see like that Antarctica thing? Because I actually have like, I'm debate brained enough to like watch these like flat Earth debates. So I knew like some questions to ask him. I know some of their talking points, but I was more like asking questions, and because he had indicated to me that he was a flat Earth, like I didn't start that conversation or anything. I'm like, oh, did you see the Antarctica thing? He's like, yeah, I know the people. They're good people who went there. I think they have patents on artificial suns, and so it's not out of the realm of possibility. Blah blah blah. I don't want to give away all the arguments. Obviously, I'm like, oh, you should have a word war debate on flat Earth. I think Modern Day Debate does that, and so like it was like a very fun, I think low stakes conversation for me. Eddie Bravo comes in, and he seems so sincere. He's like, I really like I think you're a really great debater. I don't agree with birthright citizenship, but you made a really good point when you said that thing about Gavin Newsom. That's a good point. And then he starts obviously like riffing off the producer guy to talk about flat Earth and we live in a realm and all reality is a clock, that kind of stuff. And it was so much fun, man. Like it was just so imagine me, right? At this point, I don't like drink a lot or anything, right? Like I'll have a drink or two every now and then. I'm a social drinker when occasion comes in, but like I'm 2 Coronas down and like I just had a shot with the producer or whatever. And so I'm like a little bit, a little buzzed, right? And I have Eddie Bravo to my left, one of the producers of Word War Debate, telling me we all live in a realm. To the right, maybe 5 steps away is Anna Kasparian, who just recognized me. To my left is Ryan Mullally, talking to some people who are like taking pictures with him. And then far to the corner of my eye, I see Rob Noir walking up to the Thorpes. And I'm like, do I even live? Is this a dream? What is happening? It felt like a fever. There was like a moment where I'm like, is this actually happening? It was a shot of tequila. I see Rob Noir approaching the Thorpes. The reason I know this is because afterwards, Rob came up to me. Thank you so much for the membership. Was Andrew there? Wilson, no. Rob comes up to me after that happened. I didn't know it was the Thorpes. But he comes up to me afterwards and is like, yeah, dude, the Thorpes just got kicked out, bro. The Proud Boys that like came and like backed me up. I don't know what happened in that encounter or like apparently something happened. And I'm like, oh wait, those like I vaguely recall the Thorpes because I saw, what did I see? Something with Darius. I remember like Darius was like DMing me about something. I forget. But then I'm like, oh yeah. And so Rob's like, yeah, they like just kicked him out. They just escorted him out or something. I don't know. I'm like, oh wow. So that moment is like the Eddie Bravo thing. Anna's right there. Fucking Rob Noir is getting the Thorpes kicked out or something. I don't fucking know. It felt fake. It felt like, what is happening? This is so out there, man. I mean, and then Enrico Tarrio standing like 10 feet away with his girlfriend. And yeah, like I think it's a little fucked up that the guy is welcomed in polite society at all. The guy's a fucking traitor. He's an insurrectionist fuck. So obviously disavow. But what can I do? But yeah, that's and then at some point, and I bid farewell to Eddie Bravo. I'm like, dude, it's really nice to meet you. I said bye to Anna as well, who was like, it's so nice to meet you. And like, again, very positive interactions with these people who I very much disagree with. I'm aware that I was disarmed a little bit in the sense of like, I wasn't expecting that level of like personability and genuineness that I saw. So I'm trying to be conscious of that. And so if I ever like cover Anna Kasparian in the future. I'm always going to give you my honest take and feedback, but what I can say is from that interaction, it wasn't what I expected at all, and it was very nice, very gracious. And that also extends also to Rob as well, who behind the scenes in this encounter was very sweet, very nice, and very gentle even. So that's my overview of what's happening. And Sam Tripoli too. He was nice and like very excited, almost like a kid in a candy shop, because I think he has like his hands on a lot of the stuff here. And so he was like very excited about it and like, oh, what does it mean to have these numbers? And I'm like, well, to have 600 to 700 concurrent YouTube viewers when you have a channel of 500 subs is quite impressive. Like that is, I'm almost more impressed by that number than like the Twitter fake numbers, right? Like that's a pretty good. And right now I think that their raw VOD has like 23,000 for a channel with like no subs whatsoever. It like the clips are having decent word of mouth and spreading a little bit. So yeah. I really do think that it was fun and I had a good time. So what should we get into next? Let me talk first of she saw your coverage of her take. Yeah. So I mentioned that to her. I'm like, listen, Aaron and I have, we reviewed your stuff and, obviously you're the most left-wing person there. Like we saw you like talking to Jillian Michaels and all these people and almost, usually we support you. I said to her, and she like didn't seem to be aware of that, or at least it was a little loud, not that loud, but a little bit loud. And so, but she seemed to indicate that like she didn't know that, but she did say, she was like, one thing she mentioned was, oh, I didn't see your debate. I really want to, which I thought was cool of her to say. And she almost, yeah, like Rob, almost like a more like a very gentle affect outside of the context of the debate where she was brutal. But yeah, that's my overall take on the people behind the scenes. And then the actual organizers also very accommodating, very like, treated well. Now, does this mean that I think that conservatives are good people / we should do the whole, jank strategy of when we fight, let's grab a beer all the time? No, I don't think that I think that there is a huge disparity in our desires for what we want the country to look like. No doubt. And that doesn't change no matter how much fun you have at an after party or how genuine people are behind the scenes. And so my mission is to keep fighting for the Constitution. That's my focus. And I'm not going to let, anything change that calculus. So yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was mostly on Anna's side on her take. Yeah, compared to, I even mentioned, I think I mentioned at one point, like, Lindy Lee's like pretty wild, right? And they're like, yeah, she's nice, she's a sweetheart. And okay, I understand it. I understand that there's differences of opinion on it, but usually we were supporting Anna when it came to these discrete discussions. Just being real, and anyone who watched when we did the her take stuff, yeah. But no, yeah, don't expect if you guys know me, right? I cover people who I personally like or / talk to people who I personally like and give you my honest takes. I never want to change that. But I do also want to be honest about what I thought. Now, on to the debates. So first off, what was my strat? My strat going into this was to dumb it down significantly from talk about Pearl. Yeah, we will get to that. We'll definitely get to Pearl. We're starting with mine, but we'll get to Pearl. If my voice maintains and if I feel right now I feel good. I've been feeling pretty bad all day since I got back because I'm sick. Someone got me sick. But I will talk about Pearl and Anna. My strat coming into this was to significantly dumb it down. Number one. And not to focus as much on legal citations, on trying to remind people who some of these characters are in the civil rights debates, and to ground everything in a story. And that story that I was trying to tell, I think I told it well. And this is the story I wanted to tell. Is when you think about this citizenship clause, it's about the Civil War, and it's about slavery and who gets to be a part of the American club. That was my primary focus, is to channel everything through the question of, well, what do we, thank you so much for the subs on Kick. You don't have to sub to me on Kick anymore. I do appreciate it though. I appreciate the subs on Kick. I've met the requirements, but I do really appreciate it. So everything I wanted to have, I really appreciate those Kick subs, really do. Channeled through the context of, we don't want a rule that will risk another civil war on civilizational concerns. I wanted to do that. And I also wanted to have a subsidiary point get through, which would alleviate a lot of the arguments, I think, that are intuitive to people. That is, that the 14th Amendment is about babies. It's not about the parents. With respect to the clause we're talking about, obviously, right? So that the born in the United States part, that part is about babies. And it's not about their parents. And when you turn that on, things become more clear. Now, me focusing on that, I think it did get through to people. And you'll notice by the questions, or there was only 2 questions, but at least Nick's question that he gave. And then also what was asked from the moderator, that this story got through, or this message, or this point got through. And then the final point I wanted to stress was the notion of Ryan not having a squarely justified definition of jurisdiction and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. When I got on stage, I realized that my usual strategies weren't working. Wouldn't be able to be deployed. And I'm proud of myself for recognizing that partway, and I'll tell you when I did, and rolling with it. And the reason is because Ryan is a bad faith hack who just filibusters. That's why. And because interruption in this context is seen as a greater social faux pas and as worse than in like an online debate situation. But based on what people told me afterwards, even the conservatives who disagreed with me and probably voted for Ryan, I was happy with the message that people got. So I want to review this debate. I'm going to do it at like 1.25 or 1.5. It's not super long. One thing about this debate compared to like Pearl, there are so many moments of awkward silence in the Pearl Anna debate that are like cringe-inducing to listen to. I was desperate for more time here. Like, this was a fight for the mic and picking the moments on when to stand tall to take the time. It was a quick debate. And I'm proud of myself for not losing sight of the bigger picture in that context and to stick to my plan. So that's why I'm really happy with it. What the conservatives coming up to me was like, it felt really good that worked. And then in my back pocket, I knew what I was going to do at the end was whatever he was able to distill as his jurisdiction test, I was going to put my closing in terms of MAGA. Okay? This isn't about protecting anchor babies. It's about protecting you, MAGA. This is about you, right? And I think that worked based on what people told me after. It's less about, well, we're protecting Anchor Baby. It's more about, well, if we interpret it Ryan's way, it's going to affect you. So, yeah. So let's start with the opening from Ryan. And I'll tell you what I hear and what I'm writing down kind of during this debate.
Let's get that clock up. You have 5 minutes.
Hey, everybody. I'm Ryan Mullally.
First of all, very funny that
Let's get that clock up. You have 5 minutes.
Hey,
they have it at opposite locations.
everybody. I'm Ryan Mullally. I'm an attorney. I've litigated at every level of the U.S. judicial system, including the U.S. Supreme Court. And I'm here to tell you that.
So this is the kind of thing I don't do, right? So people accuse me of doing this. I don't do it. I think people who like stress their credentials at the start of something, I think it's cringe. And I was happy to let him start that way. I don't do this. I don't say I went to a whatever school. Like I went to a good school. I worked at a good firm. Yeah, I did. I know I was a junior associate, no doubt about that. I'm not saying that I was like some partner or anything, but, and so I'm not saying that I could credibly claim to have litigated at the Supreme Court. I can't have claimed that, but it's just the kind of thing that I also don't do. And so I just want to note that, like, people will say, oh, he uses his, no, I don't. Like, I don't.
The Supreme Court should limit birthright citizenship.
Notice that turn. Oh, let's turn this up, by the way. Because sorry. Okay, there's another thing. He doesn't know how to speak into a microphone. And that's a skill diff. You get me? It's a skill diff. So his audio was worse than mine because I knew how to use a microphone.
Because we have a serious problem in our country right now.
And look at how he starts. He says, the Supreme Court should limit birthright citizenship because we have a serious problem in this country. And so this, I think, is a bullshit like framing that is he's just doing this to try to appeal to the crowd on policy grounds, but it is, I think, bullshit to only do this kind of policy grounding on the basis of like a interpretive style that you don't actually agree with, you know? Because if you were to tell him, hey, we should interpret the Second Amendment or the First Amendment to mean this because we have a big problem in this country, he would be like, that's judicial activism. That's not the role of the court. And so when I hear that, I'm just like, oh, the dude's pandering. It's not really a legal analysis at that point.
Right now, we have something called universal birthright citizenship. What does that mean? It means that anybody, with basically no exceptions, who has a child in this country, the child is a citizen. Doesn't matter how they got here.
Hey, Ryan, real quick, I hate to interrupt.
It doesn't matter how they got here. So notice when he says how they got here, I have the international slave situation in my pocket. So I notice his phrase there, how they got here. So implying that how someone arrives to the United States reflects on whether or not we should grant them, their children, right, birthright citizenship. So just keep that in mind. You know, I'm noticing what he's committing to. And so one thing he's committed to is implying heavily that the manner in which a person arrives into the United States determines whether or not you're, quote unquote, subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. And that, of course, is, in my opinion, quite untenable as a test for, quote unquote, political allegiance. So just understand as I break this down for you, how fucking insane. I understand that, like, people who are laymen listening to this might think differently, but he's just like saying totally insane fucking bullshit. Oh yeah, it's how they get here affects whether or not they're politically aligned for the reasons we'll get into.
Can you lean into your mic more?
Sure,
We're just having a hard time hearing you.
If someone comes here illegally, they cross the border illegally, we reward them with citizenship for their
Again, look at the framing. When he says we reward them with birthright citizenship, right? Only a stupid or dishonest person would say this. Someone who crosses the border illegally doesn't get birthright citizenship. You understand? Because crossing the border, you haven't been born, right? Does that make sense? Like the way Ryan is implying it is you get birthright citizenship if you cross the border, but you don't get birthright citizenship if you cross the border. The person born in the United States who is subject to the jurisdiction thereof gets birthright citizenship. So I note that as well. Yep. So he says, so I'm going to emphasize now in my opening who the subject of the 14th Amendment is.
child. Now, you don't have to take my word for this problem. This is
For this problem, right? You don't have to take my word for this problem that people get rewarded for coming into the country illegally. Okay?
a quote from Judge Posner, one of the most respected judges in America.
A quote from Judge Posner. I'm assuming he's referring to Richard Posner. Again, remember how dishonest and a snake this guy is when he comes at me incorrectly for focusing on jurists from a different, or I should say legal interpretations from a given era in the 1900s. When I was referencing a statute from the 1900s, he is now referencing like a more modern, I think he's retired at this point. He might be dead. I think he's still alive, actually. You know, a scholar from the current era to help define the scope of the quote unquote political problem, right?
He's talking about a related problem. He said, there is a huge and growing industry in Asia that arranges tourist visas for pregnant women so they can fly to the United States and give birth to an American.
And map this on, right? This problem with the international slave example that we had, which is why it was so devastating to Ryan. It's near the end of the Q&A. I bring it up during the debate itself, but even Ryan recognizes that he was completely cooked at that point. It's 1-to-1, and there's just no good answer to it. Like, totally fucked. He made a rod for his own back here. I know the volume is low. It's not on me. It's just the fact that Ryan has a skill diff and isn't actually like talking into his mic.
Obviously, Judge Posner continued, this was not the intent of the 14th Amendment of our Constitution. It makes a mockery of citizenship.
It makes a mockery of citizenship. Understand that, right? Like, we're talking about how to interpret citizenship, who gets citizenship. The 14th Amendment doesn't define citizenship. The Constitution doesn't define citizenship, right? In order for something to make a mockery of citizenship, there needs to be a self-standing understanding of A, what citizenship is that you're providing, which Ryan doesn't provide. And B, you need to explain how what Judge Posner's view is regarding citizenship controls how we ought to interpret the very constitutional provisions that seek to clarify when one receives citizenship. And remember, ultimately, he's going to ground this down into political allegiance. Notice, by the way, this originalist, this textualist, supposed textualist, never once provides the text of the 14th Amendment. Never doesn't say what the text is that he's supposed to interpret, right? Think about how Ryan starts related to how judicial activists are accused of starting, right? We're told that liberal activist judges, they always start with policy issues and they don't ground themselves in the text. The very first thing Ryan cites is a political issue, and he doesn't get into the text at all. He just says, at some broad level, like the state of affairs wouldn't have been envisioned by the 14th Amendment's framers, citation Judge Posner, you know?
And that's the problem we have today. And it's the problem that someone like Pisco embraces because he's
And so gets into personalities, right? Bad faith, slimy hack. He says, I embrace the problem. That is to say, I politically want people to abuse the system. Once again, bad faith piece of shit hack.
going to argue for universal birthright.
I'm going to argue for universal birthright citizenship from the policy perspective. What he's calling universal birthright citizenship, of course, is not universal by virtue of it having a proviso subject to the jurisdiction thereof means it's not universal. So his label is self-defeating. But again, just as I predicted, he is basically implying that I'm trying to support this industry from Asia to run citizenship mills, to like take over the country. And he's specifically appealing to like the Proud Boy sentiments in the audience, who think that there's like some aim to destroy the racial identity of America. That's this threat to undermine the stock of the country. So he's very much playing on the prejudices and fears and implying that I'm bringing in and importing this political problem and trying to perpetuate it, as opposed to reading the Constitution honestly.
Citizenship. But here's the thing. President Trump was correct to attempt to limit this.
Trump was correct to attempt to limit it. So now, by the way, Ryan Mullally has now taken a stance in favor not just of reading the law the way that he thinks it ought be read, that is to say the 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause. He has now agreed with Trump's policy in doing so. That is, Ryan actually thinks that the executive order that Trump imposed is a good thing, right? So Ryan thinks it was good politically, good from the perspective of the country, for Trump to institute this order. Just a heads up. So it's not just this legal thing. He's saying, I agree with it. It's good he did it.
Because the Constitution does not require it.
So the first mention of the Constitution is like 2 minutes into it about what the Constitution requires. Okay.
Instead, the Constitution guarantees birthright citizenship to people who are born of at least one parent, which
of at least one parent
has political allegiance.
Who has political allegiance. At least. So notice what he is putting himself in a pickle. This is related to the big omission that, if I did correctly, I think would have even made this an even bigger ruffle stomp. But he says that as long as one of your parents has, quote, political allegiance to the United States, that's the only way in which this clause applies to you.
To the United States. That's called complete jurisdiction.
Complete jurisdiction. But just notice that. Later on, he'll say, if you're subject, your political allegiance follows that of your parents. And this is where my big omission was. I should have pushed him on that, because complete, as Ryan understands it, means exclusive. And as Ryan will later say, well, if you're subject to another country, but of course you can have a child of someone who is a U.S. who's aligned to the United States and another who's aligned to the Soviet Union. In which case, which of the political allegiances governs, right? And that is where it could have been an even sweeter dunk, because I would have gotten him to be like, okay, I guess this whole thing about complete jurisdiction is bullshit. He wouldn't have granted it, of course, and I've already dunked on him with the slavery point, but it would be even sweeter if I had brought up the dual citizen type hypotheticals.
The legal term. How do I know this? Do you have to take my word for it? No, you don't. You can go back to 1884 to 1872, around the time when the 14th Amendment to our Constitution was ratified. And the
20 years after, right? 20 years after.
Court said this. I'll quote the court in Elk v. Watkins. The Supreme Court said.
By the way, I say Watkins. It's actually Wilkins. And so I should have just gone with my gut that it's Wilkins. I think it's Wilkins, not Watkins. So I should have just assumed that. I should never assume that Ryan is getting any pronunciation correct. But I did follow him and I said Watkins when it's Wilkins. Elk v. Wilkins. So L for me on pronunciation, but Ryan started it.
Birthright citizenship happens when they are completely subject to the political jurisdiction and owing complete and immediate allegiance. The Supreme Court knew. And
understand, this term allegiance is thrown around in these opinions, for sure. But he's just misconstruing what allegiance means on that score. Allegiance doesn't mean you're loyal to the government, guys. It's a term of art used by the English common law to refer to notions of subjecthood. That if you're born in the lands of the king, you owe your allegiance to the king. Okay? And it's meant to imply a requirement to follow the laws, and you will get the king's protection as well. That's what is meant by allegiance. You owe your allegiance, if you're born on the king's lands, to the king. It's not political allegiance as in you are loyal to the United States and and that's what he's trying to import there. That's why you see the term allegiance in all these opinions. And what I try to suss out is that he's lying by saying it means something more related to like your political views.
This back then. They knew you needed complete allegiance, complete jurisdiction, not universal birthright citizenship. But how did the Supreme Court know this? They listened to the
So notice that he's citing the Supreme Court, the very Supreme Court decision that later on in the conference, he's totally fucked. He's trying to overturn the seminal Supreme Court case, right? He goes to the 80s. That's when Wong Kim Ark, 1880s, that's when Wong Kim Ark was decided. So he's claiming that Wong Kim Ark supports him when the whole premise of his view is to eviscerate the reasoning of Wong Kim Ark, which he acknowledges. So it's incorrect to say that on Ryan's view, the Supreme Court got it right in the 1800s when the foundation of what he calls universal birthright citizenship is found in the cases that he's trying to eviscerate.
debates in Congress. The people who wrote the 14th Amendment said so. Senator Lyman Trumbull said, what do we mean by subject to the jurisdiction or for the purposes of birthright citizenship? It means not owing allegiance to anybody else. That
Allegiance, by which we mean requirement to obey and be subject to the government, be subject to it, to its power, to its authority. That is what is meant by allegiance in that context, not political allegiance in the sense of the kind of layman understanding of that term. This is called an equivocation, right? An equivocation.
That's what it means. You can't be a citizen of another country and get birthright citizenship.
Look at what he just says there. He's already contradicted himself. You cannot be a citizen of another country and get birthright citizenship. Before he said, well, as long as you have one parent who's politically aligned, he's just now contradicted himself, right? Look at what he said.
To anybody else. That's what it means.
So you're not aligned to anybody else. But his previous statement was only one parent, right? And again, he's constantly confusing and conflating who the citizenship clause applies to. I should say it more strongly. He is either ignorant, and the first time he heard about or thought about that the citizenship clause applies to babies was in this debate. But he's like playing fast and loose as though, oh, the illegal immigrants who are coming in here, they're aligned to another country. When of course, the citizenship clause doesn't target those immigrants. It targets their children.
You can't be a citizen of another country and get birthright citizenship.
You can't be a citizen of another country and get birthright citizenship. Well, tell that to all the dual citizens.
For your child. He said subject to the jurisdiction thereof means subject to the complete jurisdiction, which is exactly what President Trump is arguing and what I'm arguing today.
No, he's not, right? He's even lying about what Trump is arguing for. If you read Trump's brief, he doesn't argue for the political allegiance in the way he says. What Trump is arguing for is lawful domicile. You can read the briefs, guys. The test that Trump is offering ultimately turns on lawful domicile status, not on political allegiance in the way Ryan is describing. So he's just like either lying again or ignorant. This would all be wonderful if we had 4 hours. I would stop him at every different opportunity. And that would be my inclination. Wait, first you said this. Second, you said this. Let's just cash this out. That's my style. And as he's saying this, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to have to let some of this go. And so part of this is me learning and adapting to go with my affirmative plan instead of going immediately Socratically. And I think it pays off. So I think that there's definitely, I think that my style would work in the online debate context, but trying to clean up every single one of these errors, I think is impossible.
Senator John Bingham, another drafter of the 14th Amendment, said
and again, so he's quoting from various different framers, I think misrepresenting them, but I don't want to get into the individual statements themselves, okay? I know a lot of these statements. I know Trumbull's statements. I know Howard's statements. I know these statements, okay? So don't think I don't know them. But I don't want to spend our limited time bogged down in individual determinations as the individual senators and thereby give extra importance to their statements as though, because some of what their statements are saying are just not true, just heads up. Like some of what the framers of the 14th Amendment said, like, doesn't make any sense whatsoever, just to be clear. And so I don't want to give this additional aura of importance to a lot of their contemporaneous statements when they're contradictory with each other. Some of them are talking past each other. And by and large, they will all support the view of the contemporaries, which was this clean territorial jurisdiction rule. That's the overwhelming impression that you get from reading the debates, in my honest opinion.
You couldn't get birthright citizenship unless you were not owing an allegiance to any foreign sovereignty. If the parents were foreign citizens.
Again, he's just lying here, right? Because he's claiming Wong Kim Ark was correctly decided and supports his position. He says it's wrongly reasoned, but he's lying because, remember, the parents in Wong Kim Ark, the Supreme Court decision, were subjects to the Emperor of China. So what he's saying just flatly is contradicted by the holding in Wong Kim Ark and by his assertion that Wong Kim Ark supports his position, which of course it doesn't.
They could not get birthright citizenship. That's what he said. But if Posner's word isn't good enough for you, and the Supreme Court's word isn't good enough for you, and if the drafters of the 14th Amendment's words aren't good enough for you.
And the way Ryan presents it here, again, I can understand why a layperson might be swayed by this bullshit. Oh, look at all these smart people. He has everyone on his side, all of what's going on. But it's super fucking slimy. No textual analysis whatsoever. And it's obviously ignoring the majority impression of what these words meant. The majority government action. The majority view of scholars about what the citizenship clause means. So it's slimy because he's aware. He's definitely aware that to the extent of historical support for his position, the academy by and large agrees with me. The courts over the course of a century and a half largely agree with me. There's not been a single lower court, court of appeal, or Supreme Court decision that says otherwise. Scalia, his interpretation of jurisdiction agrees with me. Conservative Judge Ho agrees with me. Wong Kim Ark agrees with me. So his representation here is just a distortion. But I can understand if you have someone who says, I fucking was in the Supreme Court, I'm fucking the best, and everyone agrees with me, that lay people can buy into that chicanery. It's just not true.
You can look at the overwhelming historic evidence that this is what birthright citizenship means in this country, which you can trace to the Civil War of 1861. You can trace it through the Civil Rights Act of 1866, to the ratification.
The Civil Rights Act of 1866, and again, he's aware of this, uses different words than the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment, like very, very different words, and also is not inconsistent with it at all.
Of the 14th Amendment in 1868, the overwhelming agreement of scholars in the period that followed.
And notice that in the period that followed, not true, right? Because of course, the scholars on the Supreme Court ruled otherwise.
And the practices of our own government.
The practice of our own government, which, again, the majority, the vast majority, is to grant citizenship in the way that I describe. That's why it's been the consensus over the last 100 plus years. So the way he's painting it is so fucking dishonest, right? There are a couple examples where, you know, they might not grant citizenship. Some executive will refuse to do it, or there's a boat subject to another power who emergency lands the place, whatever. So like, but there's no like court ruling on it. There are like scant little examples of executive practice to the contrary, but he's blowing their importance up as though they fucking represent some large set of precedent that counters the overwhelming, that's his word, precedent to the contrary.
All which show that universal birthright citizenship is a recent invention, not a...
It's not a recent invention, right? It's been the consensus since Wong Kim Ark in the 1880s. How is that recent? He knows he's lying, right? This is why I call him a bad faith hack.
Constitutional requirement. We can and we should fix it. Now, against this overwhelming tide of evidence,
Overwhelming. He just keeps saying overwhelming, 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 overwhelming. Yeah. Do I understand why conservative voters and conservatives want to hear overwhelming, overwhelming, overwhelming? You're right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, sure. But it's not true, right? It's a lie.
Pisco is going to more or less hang his hat on one case.
More or less hang his hat on one case.
It's called Wong Kim Ark. He's going to tell you all about it. I'll leave that to him because it's his side of the argument. But here's the thing you need to know about Wong Kim Ark, and you really only need to know one thing. Wong Kim Ark only says that you have to give birthright citizenship if the parents are here permanently and legally.
That's just a lie, right? And I'll actually bring up Wong Kim Ark to show this. And so he either didn't read it or he's, again, lying, right? Because he's a fucking liar on this shit. Here we go. Second. So again, proof that Ryan is lying. So I'll just play the clip of when he says this again. And then let me just get this other thing real quick. Sorry, guys, just chill. I should have had this prepared. I'm playing music. 1 second. All right, got it. All right, so Ryan lied. So this is him lying.
You have to give birth. Know one thing. Wong Kim Ark only says that you have to give birthright citizenship if the parents are here permanently and legally.
So this is not what Wong Kim Ark says. Ryan is literally lying. So listen to the court. I'm going to read all aspects of it. So the court cites 2 cases and then says the literal opposite. And sorry, this is going to take like probably 5 minutes, but we're going to do it because just to show you how much of a liar he is. In United States versus Rice, goods imported into cast iron into the state of Maine, while it was in the exclusive possession of the British authorities during the last war with England, were held not to be subject to duties under the revenue laws of the United States because, as was said by Mr. Justice Story in delivering judgment, By the conquest and military occupation of Castine, the enemy acquired that firm possession which enabled him to exercise the fullest rights of sovereignty over that place. The sovereignty of the United States over the territory was, of course, suspended, and the laws of the United States could no longer be rightfully enforced there or be obligatory upon the inhabitants who remained and submitted to the conquerors. By the surrender, the inhabitants passed under a temporary alliance to the British government and were bound by such laws, and such only as it chose to recognize and impose. From the nature of the case, no other laws could be obligatory upon them, for where there is no protection or allegiance or sovereignty, there can be no claim to obedience. We're going to continue on. This is the big case, and you'll see it's going to dismantle Ryan's point. In the great case of the exchange, the grounds upon which foreign ministers are and other aliens are not exempt from the jurisdiction of this country were set forth by Chief Justice Marshall in a clear and powerful train of reasoning, of which it will be sufficient for our present purposes to give little more than the outlines. The opinion did not trust upon the anomalous case of the Indian tribes, the true relation of which to the United States was not directly brought before the court until some years afterwards in Cherokee Nations versus Georgia, nor upon the case of a suspension of the sovereignty of the United States over part of their territory by reason of a hostile occupation, such as was also afterwards presented in United States versus Rice, above cited. But in all other respects, it covered the whole question of what persons within the territory of the United States are subject to the jurisdiction thereof. The Chief Justice, this is Marshall, first laid down the general principle: the jurisdiction of the nation within its own territory is necessarily exclusive and absolute, right? Necessarily exclusive and absolute. It is susceptible of no limitation not imposed by itself. Any restriction upon it deriving validity from an external source would imply a diminution of its sovereignty to the extent of the restriction, and an investment of that sovereignty to the same extent in that power which could impose such restriction. All exceptions, therefore, to the full and complete power of a nation within its own territories must be traced up to the consent of the nation itself. They can flow from no other legitimate source. This consent may be either express or implied. In the latter case, it is less determinate, exposed more to the uncertainties of construction, but if understood, not less obligatory. He then stated, and supported by argument and illustration, that is Marshall, that this full and absolute territorial jurisdiction, being alike the attribute of every sovereign and being incapable of conferring extraterritorial power, has given rise to a class of cases in which every sovereign is understood to waive the exercise of a part of that complete exclusive territorial jurisdiction, which has been stated to be the attribute of every nation. The first of which is the exemption from arrest or detention of the person of a foreign sovereign entering its territory with its license because, quote, a foreign sovereign is not understood as intending to subject himself to a jurisdiction incompatible with his dignity and the dignity of the nation. A second case, standing upon the same principles with the first, is the immunity which all civilized nations allow to foreign ministers. A third case in which a sovereign is understood to cede a portion of his territorial jurisdiction is where he allows the troops of a foreign prince to pass through his dominions. And in conclusion, there is a public armed ship in the service of a foreign nation with whom the government of the United States is at peace, and having entered an American port open for her reception, on the terms on which ships of war are generally permitted to enter the ports of a friendly power, must be considered as having come into the American territory under an implied promise that while necessarily within it and demeaning herself in a friendly manner, she could be exempt from the jurisdiction of the country. As to the immunity of a foreign minister, he said, whatever might be the principle on which this immunity is established, whether we consider him as in the place of the sovereign he represents, or by political fiction suppose him to be extraterritorial and therefore in point of law not within the jurisdiction of the sovereign at which court he resides, still the immunity itself is granted by the governing power of the nation to which the minister is deputed. The fiction of extraterritoriality could not be erected and supported against the will of the sovereign of the territory. He's supposed to assent to it. The assent of the sovereign to the very important and extensive exemptions from territorial jurisdiction, which are admitted to attach to foreign ministers, is implied from the consideration that without such exemption, every sovereign would hazard his own dignity by employing a public minister abroad. His minister would owe temporary and local allegiance to a foreign prince and would be less competent to the objects of his mission, right? A sovereign committing the interests of his nation with a foreign power to the care of a person whom he has selected for that purpose cannot intend to subject his minister in any degree to that power, and therefore a consent to receive him implies a consent that he shall possess the privileges which his principle intended he should retain, privileges which are essential to the dignity of his sovereign and to the duties he is bound to perform. The reasons for not allowing to other alien exemption from the jurisdiction of the country which they are found were stated as follows. So all of that so far, and it's going to be even more emphatic, shows that this is not extended to other aliens, okay? When private individuals of one nation spread themselves through another as business or caprice may direct, okay? Understand this. When private individuals go through a nation on business or caprice, on whim, right? Mingling indiscriminately with the inhabitants of that other, or when merchant vessels enter for the purposes of trade, not permanently, right? Not permanently. It would be obviously inconvenient and dangerous to society and would subject the laws to continual infraction and the government to degradation if such individuals or merchants did not owe temporary and local allegiance and were not amenable to the jurisdiction of the country. What are they saying, right? This is quoting from the exchange favorably, and then you're going to get to the fucking dunk, okay? That unlike what Ryan is saying here, listen to what Ryan said.
You need to know one thing. Wong Kim Ark only says that you have to give birthright citizenship if the parents are here permanently.
Permanently and legally, he says. Permanently. Is a merchant from another distant shore coming in just to trade here permanently? No, of course not. Even private individuals who spread themselves as business or caprice may direct owe temporary and local allegiance, by which we mean what? They're subject to the power. They're subject to the obligation to follow the laws. Obviously. And we're going to keep going, but that's a big whopper, a lie, right? This is Wong Kim Ark. Nor can the foreign sovereign have any motive for wishing such exemption. His subjects, right, of the foreign power, passing into foreign countries are not employed by him. They're not engaged in national pursuits. Consequently, there are powerful motives for not exempting persons of this description from the jurisdiction of the country which they are found, and no one motive for requiring it. The implied license, therefore, under which they can enter, can never be construed to grant such an exemption. In short, the judgment in the case of the exchange, this is now the court from Wong Kim Ark, declared as incontrovertible principles that the jurisdiction of every nation within its own territory is exclusive and absolute, and is susceptible of no limitation not imposed by the nation itself, that all exceptions to its full and absolute territorial jurisdiction must be traced up to its own consent, express or implied, that upon its consent to cede or to waive the exercise of a part of its territorial jurisdiction, rest the exemptions from that jurisdiction of foreign sovereigns or their armies entering its territory with its permission and of the foreign ministers and public ships of war, and that the implied license under which private individuals of another nation enter the territory and mingle indiscriminately with its inhabitants for purposes of business or pleasure can never be construed to grant to them an exemption from the jurisdiction of the country in which they are found. What does this mean? Right? What does this fucking mean? This means that Ryan is lying, right? Because what Wong Kim Ark is saying here is not that in order to be subject to the jurisdiction, you must be coming to a place permanently. It says the opposite. It says that there is no exemption for people who are coming to the country just for business or pleasure. Maybe not lying or poor research. One or the two, but this guy spent, this is why I assume he's lying, because did he not even read the fucking most important case that they're trying to overturn? Did he not read the respondent's brief? Which I'll just show you the respondent's brief, right? Assuming he did the bare amount of research listen, he says that he researches in and practices at the Supreme Court level. Wouldn't he be implied to have read the respondent's brief in this case? Look, just go and Control F the exchange, right? In so doing, this court authority, like, this is not something that would have been hard to find. That subject to the jurisdiction thereof in the Citizenship Clause explained those words meant the same thing as the like words used by Chief Justice Marshall in the McFadden case, and the exchange, as Wong Kim Ark went on to explain, made clear that temporary visitors, i.e. non-domiciled non-citizens, owed this country temporary and local allegiance and were amenable to the jurisdiction of the country. So I find it highly, highly unlikely that, or maybe it is, and maybe that therefore, like, we should just assume that he is a terrible, terrible researcher, that Ryan would not have read the respondent's brief, which makes this point plain, right? So it's wrong. It's either a lie or evidence of horrible research that Ryan would say that by its terms, Wong Kim Ark requires for you to be subject to the jurisdiction permanent and legal presence, when it says directly the opposite, that there's no exemption for people who just enter the country temporarily for business or pleasure. So I know it took a little bit to set up, but it really is just like outrageous. And I understand that I know this going into it. And so I'm showing a great amount of restraint to not get bogged down in the weeds of this particular precedent, or indeed to say the exchange. Like, I know this, right? Like, I didn't want to even say the case, the exchange, when I said, I briefly mentioned this, and I'll show you when I do it, just because I don't want to get bogged down in like, this case says it, and this, but like, just know, while I'm having this conversation and while I'm hearing Ryan, I just know that he's just like woefully either lying or like not prepared. And if he didn't read the respondent's brief, then like, fuck him. And why is he here?
And legally.
Right? Direct opposite. He says, Wong Kim Ark says you need to be here permanently, legally, to be subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Literal opposite.
Birthright citizenship if the parents are here permanently and legally. And President Trump agrees with that. He doesn't disagree with that. He doesn't want to change that. He agrees with that. What President Trump wants to change.
No, he fucking doesn't. No, he doesn't. Right? That's not true.
Is if you're here illegally, if you're here temporarily doing birth tourism. He wants to say that those situations don't warrant citizenship in the greatest country
Is that an argument? Is that an argument as to what the Constitution means? No.
on earth. And the Constitution doesn't require it. So the Supreme Court should change it. And I'll let Disco tell you all about why I'm wrong.
So complete garbage, cherry picking quotes that he misrepresented, talking about how there's an overwhelming set of precedent that directly contradicts him, mischaracterizing the most important case from this era, Wong Kim Ark, mischaracterizing the nature of what allegiance even means and equivocating on that word. And I am writing down what my strategy is different things he said. But I'm not trying to get bogged down into the specifics. And this is where I start.
Nicely done, and you have 30 seconds to spare. All right, good job, Ryan. By the way, I just want to mention, too, if you are comfortable with it, you can take the mics out if you want to hold them in your hands, okay?
Great, thank you.
But nice job. All right, Pisco, you're up. We're going to reset that timer, and we'll give you your 5 minutes.
Awesome. Thank
Skill diff.
you, Ryan. And thanks, everyone, for being here. I think it's a really important conversation. And I thank you, Word Debate, and also shout out Rob Knorr. So we're all trying to figure out what this term
We're all
means.
trying to figure out who did this. So I wanted to start with the text. I wanted to do what Ryan didn't do, which is to explain the words we're trying to understand.
in the 14th Amendment. And the words are as follows: all persons born or naturalized in
Not reading from anything, memorized the words, already knew the words, fucking skill diff.
the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state in which they reside. Those are the words. And the weight of evidence is overwhelming
I used his word overwhelming.
that the Supreme Court got it right in Wong Kim Ark. Let's start with the text. Let's go through an originalist understanding of the text. All persons, no limitation, born in the United States geographically. The only dispute is on what this term, subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
Now, I was restraining myself from, there are other things I want to say about it, right? I want to say that the fact that the states are at the end is a direct result of the Civil War and the sort of wanting to get away from states being able to control issues of citizenship. And that shows the aversion to having this dispute be brought up again, right? But I'm limiting myself. I'm going right to it, doing a textual analysis and focusing on that as opposed to the policy issue.
Means what kind of
I don't want to. I don't want to get into like, you should accept anchor babies. Like, that strat is bad, right? Like, any strat that is talking about the policy here, I don't think is worth our time. And it's going to be received even worse than a legal argument.
Geographically. The only dispute is on what this term, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, means. What kind of limitation is it? And you can look up dictionaries now. You can look up dictionaries that existed at the time. And what jurisdiction means is subject to the political authority, subject to the laws, subject to the power of the United States government. Notice also,
And I wanted to immediately give my meaning for jurisdiction grounded in what the actual legal dictionaries, what people writing about jurisdiction mean with respect to a country's jurisdiction. And it makes complete and total sense. Power.
In that phrase, all persons born or naturalized, the subject is not the United States government.
And this is in response to him talking about the problem of illegal immigrants and they're able to get birthright citizenship. And so I'm like, all right, I now need to make this point in my opening and to really cement this is about the children.
Notice also in that phrase, all persons born or naturalized, the subject is not the parents. The subject is the children. Are the children subject to the jurisdiction of the United States government? You can start and end there with a plain meaning of what jurisdiction means, what they understood jurisdiction to mean at the time. Ryan will provide you no definition that you'll find in Black's Law Dictionary or in the contemporaneous writings of the framers of the 14th Amendment that suggests that jurisdiction is equal to this ultimately elastic test of political allegiance. Because of course it's not. What the framers were doing of the 14th Amendment was incorporating the English common law rule regarding birthright citizenship. Our American legal system isn't built out of whole cloth. It's built on a foundation of English law.
I don't know what I was thinking there. Yeah.
That was what we imported into this.
I think Anglican means English, right? Am I wrong about that? But it just seems like religious, right? So I was like, is that right? I didn't want to say Anglican and imply religious. But it might, one of the definitions might mean English. I just want to make sure. But I tripped myself up there. Relating to or denoting the Church of England. So maybe not. Maybe not. Oh, wait, no. Definition 2, of or relating to England or the English nation. Okay, yeah. I mean, it's true. I questioned myself there, and I wanted to make sure it was correct.
It's built on a foundation of English law. That was what we imported into this country. And the law persisting in the United Kingdom or in the British Empire at the time.
And I fucked myself up a little bit there, too. I'm like, oh... and this is an example, I think, of something I can improve, is to just, instead of correcting myself, I didn't need to be like, or British Empire there. So there's little things where I think I am sometimes too trying to be specific that I get in my own way a little bit.
Was this law of birthright citizenship. And there were clear exceptions as recognized by the court in Wong Kim Ark that were limited and narrow to the children of ambassadors, to the children of foreign and conquering armies behind enemy lines, and then in these pseudo kind of sovereign spheres in the American context of American Indians. So that's what they meant to do. That's what the words mean. And putting aside that Elk versus Watkins, a case that...
And I shouldn't have said Watkins there because he got the fucking it's the wrong name. It's Wilkins, but I listened to him, and that's the last time I'll ever rely on Ryan's representations about anything.
Ryan cites was cited also by the court in Wong Kim Ark. There's no contradiction between Elk v. Watkins and Wong Kim Ark. But there's a broader structural point that I want
This is the point that was most that I wanted to get to, and the one that I think actually did land with people and that people heard, and where my closing argument hypothetical worked well, and why people came up to me and said that was a good point, is that stressing the Civil War and then connecting it to January 6th near the end, we think about trying to settle things, prevent abuse, and I think that appealed to people. And I think it's justified to do that kind of slippery slope policy thing in this case, because that kind of policy goal was on the mind of the framers at the time they drafted it, as opposed to Ryan's policy argument, which wasn't, right?
All to take home. We have to remember what was happening in the country when the 14th Amendment was passed. We had just gone through one of the most devastating wars, the most devastating war in American history. Estimates of almost like 1 million people dead. The entire South, or much of the South and many of its major cities, ruined. Remember what started that conflict. We all know the easy answer, right? The easy answer is slavery. But there's a more fundamental layer behind that, which is what the war was about who's part of the club. It's a Jeffersonian ideal, whether all men are created equal. Remember Dred Scott. What was the Dred Scott decision about? Whether members of the slave race could be considered American citizens in this context. Now, when you realize what had happened, what the framers were trying to do, which is to prevent another conflagration like we saw in the Civil War, of course, what they wanted to do by passing a constitutional provision, not a statute, was not just overturn Dred Scott, but to make a rule that was administrable, a rule that was simple, a rule that was easy, a rule that they were familiar with. They didn't want an ultimately elastic test for the states to decide what citizenship was, or for Congress to later change what citizenship was, because they had just gone through that. And so any rule which Ryan is going to provide that turns on this ultimately elastic test of whatever he thinks political allegiance means is going to have to run into that. The framing generation after the Civil War, after Lincoln's assassination, never wanting to have a fight like this again, to firmly settle the issue. And that's ultimately what they did in the 14th Amendment by having the territorial rule with the limited common law exceptions. That's what it says, and that's what they meant.
I fuck around with the fucking mic a little bit here. That's minus 1 point here for Aura. I will say that I think it was the correct choice to leave my Gavin Newsom hypothetical to the end, because even though if I think bringing it up here would have produced more hypotheticals that I could attack him on and maybe reframe the conversation a little bit, I think having it so it's the last thing you hear from me, and he didn't respond to it really, I think that was effective. So, and giving him more time to think about something to say to it, if we're doing this from a pure debate pedantry perspective, and you know, Ryan loves to sandbag, and so I don't feel bad doing it. I think that shifting it to the end and starting with the words, starting with jurisdiction, I'm okay with that decision.
All right, you also finished it with 30 seconds left. Nice job. Okay, so those were the two opening statements, 5 minutes apiece. We're now going to go into the open debate. It's 25 minutes long. Gentlemen.
What does jurisdiction mean, Ryan?
That's exactly where I want to go, is to get him to commit to saying political allegiance again, and get the audience to be conscious of the fact that he's not answering fully.
So what Pisco's doing here is he's starting with the definition, and I see why.
I see why he's starting. Of course we should start with the definition, right?
Reason is that jurisdiction is one of those words that has a lot of meanings. So if we say that, we can sit here all day and talk about the meaning.
So what's the meaning on your view, Ryan?
Jurisdiction will never.
So jurisdiction can mean anything, right? It can mean. So think about what he's trying to say here. He's trying to say, don't think about what the words mean. Don't think about the word. It can mean fucking anything, right? That's how fucking slimy this is, right? And so he wants to try to avoid that, right? And notice the different hoops he jumps through here.
Get anywhere. I'll actually quote the Supreme Court in a case called Contract v. Ryan.
So he has a case ready to go to explain why he shouldn't talk about what subject to the jurisdiction thereof means. So just notice what he's doing here. He's trying to justify him not answering the question. Again, this is what I mean with like people who pay attention. If you just like pay any attention to what he's doing here, it's so fucking absurd.
This was Justice Ginsburg, for whatever that's worth.
Justice Ginsburg. By the way, yes, jurisdiction can mean different things. I'm the one who recognized that in the fucking conversation with Rob Knorr about territorial jurisdiction being different than subject matter jurisdiction, etc. It can mean different things than personal jurisdiction, but we're talking subject to the jurisdiction thereof. In that context, what do you propose jurisdiction means then, right? So he knows, right? Yes, jurisdiction can mean different things in different contexts, but in this context, what does it mean, right? So this dodging, I don't think looks good to someone who's actually like paying attention.
Jurisdiction is a word of too many meanings. But here's what I will say, Pisco. You mentioned.
So not answering, right? Oh, jurisdiction has too many meanings, so we can't. So who fucking knows? And so doesn't answer the question, right? The first time I asked him.
Black's Law Dictionary, right?
Yeah, so Black's Law has multiple definitions.
So I know exactly. So when he says, the thing is, Ryan shouldn't give the game away like this, right? So the minute he says Black's Law Dictionary, you mentioned that, didn't you, Pisco? I know that like Black probably said some stupid shit, right? And so I'm preparing for him, like for Black saying some stupid shit. But of course, I know exactly he's not going to get me on this, right? To say, well, the individual views of someone who writes a dictionary determines what the public meaning of a phrase, of a word is, right? Of course, imagine that your job is to be a dictionary writer and you have a view about what the 14th Amendment means. Does the dictionary writer, he gets to control what the law is? Not a judge, not the Supreme Court, the person who writes the dictionary. Now, the reason the dictionary is important is because it informs the public meaning of a term, not because it reflects the personal attitudes and dispositions of the dictionary writer, right? But so the moment he says, you mentioned Black's Law, didn't you? I'm like, oh my God, is he really trying this shit? And so I know, and so you can see me here now. As soon as he says that, I'm trying to take time from the mic to dull the fucking bullshit dunk attempt that he's going to do and say, you know, it's not so specific to black. It's every dictionary. And yeah, you'll look up it and it'll be correct if you look at Black's Law Dictionary.
Too many meanings. But here's what I will say, Pisco. You mentioned Black's Law Dictionary, right?
Well, yeah, so Black's Law has multiple definitions in it, subject to the
So I mean, I'm here noting that at first I'm like, is he going to say that Black's Law Dictionary has different definitions of jurisdiction? I'll grant that. And so I'm like, yeah, Black's Law has many different definitions, but here, subject to the jurisdiction means
jurisdiction. In that context, what do you propose that it means?
Well,
so I reformulate and ask the question again, second time. What are you saying that it means?
can I back you up a second?
Sure, but I would like for you to.
Yo, what up, Word War Debate? Hey, shout out Word War Debate. I want all of you guys to follow Word War Debate. If you want to see more libs, I know that there's conservative people who are a lot of the supporters and who are attending the event, but I want our libs to be strong and go attend even in these confrontational spaces. And we want to see more of these, of strong lib people tell the truth in front of conservatives. We want to move the needle on these issues. And the best way for you to do that is to support these efforts. Yes, even that doesn't mean that you need to like donate to the fucking Proud Boys, but I would like you to like sub to the channel for the next time we have a lib on there so you know about it at least. And if it's just conservatives saying bullshit stuff, you can clip them and shit. So go give them a follow, and thank you Word War Debate for the invite. All right? Appreciate you.
Black's Law Dictionary, for those who don't know, is, I think Peace would agree with me, the most authoritative.
And look what he's trying to do here. So it's so obvious he's setting up for this bullshit point about Black himself. I see it a mile away. You would agree Black's Law Dictionary is the most authoritative dictionary on everything. And so the thing is, Ryan doesn't even fucking believe that, right? His own judicial philosophy says we need to get dictionaries from when they happened. When I say in my opening, like, yeah, you can look at modern dictionaries, you can look back then, you can look at Black's Law Dictionary, you can look at, so he is trying to make it so that that the audience thinks slimy debate tactic, that I'm putting all my eggs in Black's basket. I of course reject that framing. I say it's a well-known one among many others. Yeah,
But
right.
I would like for you to
Black's Law Dictionary.
context. What do you propose that it means?
Well, can I back you up a second?
Sure, but I would like for you to.
Black's Law Dictionary, for those who don't know, is, I think Peace would agree with me, the most authoritative, the most well-known law dictionary.
It's well known, but it's among many different dictionary definitions,
So I'm immediately saying like it's well known. It's among many others that confirm my view.
which confirms that power, authority, what it means to be subject to the jurisdiction of a country, is to be beholden to its laws. If illegal immigrants, even assuming that the 14th Amendment were targeted.
And I'm taking the space, right, to take I know where he's going, right? I know he's going to say Black said some shit about the 14th Amendment, and I'm just taking this thing out of it and saying every dictionary agrees with me, and and to get my other point, which is it focuses on the children, not on the parent. So I know what I'm doing. I know what he's trying to do. I know he's trying to set up for a dunk on Black. It's bullshit. It's slimy. He knows better. He knows that what he's doing is just trying to farm. Oh my God, his own source. That's the only thing he's trying to do. It's a totally dishonest attempt to try to do that. And even on my view, on his view, he knows it's bullshit. And so this is me reiterating that every dictionary agrees with me that the focus is on the children and taking this thing out of his bullshit attempt to dunk.
It's well known, but it's among many different dictionary definitions, which confirms that power, authority, what it means to be subject to the jurisdiction of a country, is to be beholden to its laws. If illegal immigrants, even assuming that the 14th Amendment were targeted at the parents, which it's not, I just told you, it's targeted to the children, even assuming it was, of course, people who are here and who came illegally are subject to the laws of the United States. They're bound by them.
Even if they're here temporarily?
Yes, and in fact, you misquote Wong Kim Ark when you say it's just.
So here, this is me specifically thinking about the case that we just saw Wong Kim Ark cite, the exchange. But notice, I'm not trying to quote directly or get too in the weeds of the particular misquotes of law. Okay? That's why let him do all the bullshit fucking citation. I just want to make the point and get out with respect to the legal particularities. That's why I'm like, I'm not being very this case, that case, that case. I don't think it's helpful to my point and to try to be like more of a basic person here and less in the weeds. That this was a strategy going into it, informed by people tell me sometimes dumb it down, right?
United States. They're bound by them.
Even if they're here temporarily?
Yes, and in fact, you misquote.
And this is me, again, I'm desperate at this moment to get more speaking time. I understand at this point, I'm recognizing that this dude just wants to filibuster, and the goal is going to be to control time, to try to control time, control frame, and I'm not going to be able to do all the Socratic stuff that I would like to do, and better to focus on controlling time, and repeating the same point multiple times.
Wong Kim Ark, when you say it's just
I did meet Anna. I talked about it. If you scrub back, you can find me talking about it.
permanent people there. In Wong Kim Ark specifically, they reference the case that they're citing, which talks about
The case that they're citing, I don't want to say the case of the exchange, right? The case that they're citing.
temporary people staying in the country. And they knew that even people here of Chinese descent, that's what they're mentioning, who are here on a temporary basis, are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States.
That's a little imprecise. So what they're citing in Wong Kim Ark are the Chinese people, and in the debates is other Chinese people. The exchange was about the previous thing. But again, these are all nuances that if I had more time, I would lay out more like cleanly. But my goal is to get in, get out, and not to dwell so much on the specifics.
States. Scalia recognizes that that's what the term means. Conservative jurists like Jato have recognized this. It's
About jurisdiction, right? Grounding in jurisdiction. And right now, I think I've effectively taken the sting out of but black, he's going to try to keep pushing on black. And at this point, right, I feel that all he's done, he's trying to get me on a dunk that is so tangential on a term that he hasn't defined yet. And he hasn't really put forth an affirmative case yet. He's trying to justify why I'm like, you cited black or whatever. And I think so far he's wasting time and playing into my framing, which is that the term jurisdiction really, really, really matters.
what it means, and you have no alternative definition that you've offered.
Well, let's
And again, reiterating, you haven't offered a definition yourself.
back up a second. And we could talk about Wong Kim Ark, I'm sure we will for a long time. But you mentioned
We won't. And frankly, I think he's trying to bait me to get into Wong Kim Ark more. And I'm not taking the bait, right? Because getting into Wong Kim Ark more means like getting into like more, like we just did, right? Where it was kind of like, he's reading this thing. I think he's trying to bait me into discussing Wong Kim Ark like more from a legal perspective and losing the audience a bit.
Black's Law Dictionary in your opening. And you said here that you think birthright citizenship should attend even if the parents are here temporarily. So since you said that, I'm delighted you did. I'd like to read you something. This is from Henry Campbell Black, the author of Black's Law Dictionary, in his Handbook of American Constitutional Law, published in 19...
Yeah, nonplussed. I knew this was coming. It was so obvious he was signaling that Black said some shit about the 14th Amendment. Of course, as I explained before, Black's Law Dictionary isn't relevant for what the dictionary writer thinks, but rather what the original public meaning of a term is related to the population understanding the meaning of the Constitution. That's the judicial philosophy. No one will say like, hey, dictionary writers get to decide what the law is. That's not what it's about.
1910. And he wrote, and I quote, "This jurisdiction," in reference to the 14th Amendment, "must at the time be both actual and exclusive. So if a stranger or traveler passing through the country or temporarily residing here, but who has not himself been naturalized and who claims to have no allegiance to our government, has a child born here who goes out of the country with his father, such child is not a citizen of the United States."
That's not the question.
So me, immediately I know exactly that's not the question. The question isn't what Black's view is on the 14th Amendment. The question is, what does the dictionary say jurisdiction means, right?
Subject to its jurisdiction.
That's
so peace.
So he's trying so hard, right, to make this dunk land. But it's a bad faith, slimy, sleazy move here. This is why I call Ryan bad faith. He is bad faith. I really enjoy my time with Ryan. Incredibly bad faith. He knows that on my view, the dictionary writer is irrelevant, his personal views on it. He knows that he also subscribes to a judicial philosophy of original public meaning. So he knows this is bad faith, hackish move, a low rate move from a low rate debater.
The author of Black's Law Dictionary, who you cited in your opening, agrees with me.
So it's not true.
His interpretation of constitutional law, and he's on my side.
It's not true. So you have offered no definition.
So me, again, repeating, you're just distracting from the fact that you have offered no definition. He's desperate. He's desperate to try to get me. No, address the black stuff. And again, totally nonplussed.
Of what is hang on a second. So I let you finish. I let you finish. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That is a reference to authority, to power. And if you look at Black's Law Dictionary, you'll see that definition. And I'm asking whether.
So I'm there repeating. I've given you a definition for jurisdiction. If you look at Black's Law definition, it totally that's what the word means. That's what it means in context. Reiterating that supports me. That's my view. It's in the dictionary.
Whatever his interpretation is of the
and then me saying whatever his interpretation is of the 14th Amendment is irrelevant. Immediately I know the response to it. He has set up for this dunk. It has totally and utterly failed. It's over the head of like most of the audience at this point. The only thing they're hearing, right, and the only thing that Ryan dishonestly and in bad faith is trying to do is be like, wow, your own guy agrees with me. And like he's doing that theatric, which is what Kyla calls out. To be, oh, like who is the one making the point and who's the one playing it up, handing it up for the audience? It's a desperate attempt at a dunk, which fails and which is bad faith in and of itself.
If you look at Black's Law Dictionary, you'll see that definition. And I'm asking,
just making sure I'm understanding the dispute is about what the original public meaning of the 14th Amendment is, and if its public meaning encompass kind of foreigners. Ryan takes anti. So the dispute is about what the original public meaning is of the 14th Amendment, correct? But when I offer dictionaries, I offer both contemporaneous, old, and Black's. I actually don't think Black's Law Dictionary is a contemporaneous dictionary. Hang on, Black's Law. Oh, it might be. Oh, wait, no. The first publication date was, it says 1891. So it's not a contemporaneous dictionary. I just am citing, like every dictionary will support me, right? So I'm just saying, like, we cover the field. Whatever you want to say about jurisdiction, in this context, it means power and authority and, the right to compel legally, right? That's what it means. And he has taken that because he has some heritage author who found Black saying his interpretation of the 14th Amendment in the 1890s or 1900s, right? That is dispositive on what jurisdiction means in the context of the 14th Amendment. That's why it's dishonest.
Whatever his interpretation is of the 14th Amendment isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about the meaning of the term subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And I'm asking you now for the third time, Ryan, what does that term
So now third time, right? What does it mean? Still hasn't provided it.
Pisco, this is what's so embarrassing about this for you. I quoted him. He said, this jurisdiction must at the time be actual and exclusive, and then continue to explain that
Still desperate for the same thing, not offering any affirmative definition of jurisdiction, desperate to try to just appeal to the lowest common denominator. Your own guy, like, it's so pathetic. And this is why I rate Ryan so lowly as a debater, and he's really just horribly bad faith and bad. I mean, like, only, in my opinion, really, only silly people will be fooled by this kind of bullshit.
somebody was here temporarily, there would be no birth.
So let's test it. So let's test it.
No,
So let's we're gonna test it, Ryan.
No,
So we're
before we test it,
Ryan, we're gonna test it.
Acknowledge you cited Blacks. Black agrees with me, correct?
Whether he does on the 14th Amendment is
Correct.
is immaterial.
Whether he does on the 14th Amendment, he wants me to say, yes, Black agrees with you on the 14th Amendment. I say whether he does or not, and I eventually say, I don't know if you're representing his views correctly, because to be honest, I haven't seen a dispositive citation of you, which I have seen, so I'm not going to just agree just because you say it. You're wrong about other stuff, and so at no point do I, assert that it's true. I'm just saying whether he does or not is irrelevant.
Correct.
I don't know that you're properly representing his views on the 14th Amendment.
I am
and of course,
absolutely
and of
properly
course,
representing.
you would agree that the authoritative sources about what the meaning of the Constitution is relates to the original public meaning.
This was your source.
Just to be clear.
You're wrong.
Guys, you're talking so much over each other.
So
So he's still desperate, and I'm just easily, I think, dismantling him.
We're going to get an assertion from Ryan. Ryan, is it or is it not the case that you subscribe to a theory of judicial interpretation called original public meaning?
I do, though.
So-
whether or not-
Wait, hold on. If you ask him a question, let him answer.
Go for it.
I do, but just to head this off at the pass, whether or not my own philosophy has any relevance.
Whether or not my own philosophy has any, wait, your own philosophy doesn't have a relevance on what, remember, this is all about what the word means, right? And does he think I take the view that what Black's personal views on the 14th Amendment are dispositive, right? That's how he's such a fucking bad faith piece of shit hack, right? He says, my judicial philosophy is irrelevant. Yours is what's relevant. Do you think that it's possible that he would say, Pisco thinks that what dictionary writers say about amendments is dispositive on what the law says? Does he think that I would say that? No, of course. That's why it's bad faith, right?
This I don't
So
understand.
let's feel. So you would agree that under the notion of original public meaning,
Pisco, you don't know that originalism means what Mr. Black thinks? Yeah, this is why it's so bad faith. You understand this? Because his own philosophy doesn't mean this. He knows that I don't mean this. And so that's why it's so cheap. It's so disgusting.
what matters isn't the specific intentions and thoughts and opinions of someone who writes a dictionary, correct?
But I gave you Pisco.
And won't answer. But I gave you other stuff.
I gave
So now he realizes that I've effectively parried it and said, I gave you other stuff too. This is the fucking cuck chair position. Now that he knows that I'm not going to be fucking scared, right? Like, I'm not put off. I'm not scared by this point. This point is not a good point. And so now he's trying to evade it and be like, well, I said other stuff too.
In my
not.
opening, I just want to recall so that you and the audience remembers, I cited the Supreme Court. I cited the people who wrote this, and then I cited overwhelming historic evidence, which I'm happy
Overwhelming.
to provide. I'm not saying that Blacks himself
I'm not saying Blacks himself.
is dispositive. I'm
So
saying
the-
it's good
so Black's
evidence,
Law
and it's particularly
Dictionary-
good evidence because he's an authoritative source that you yourself referenced.
So Black's Law Dictionary, from an originalist perspective, isn't relevant insofar as Black's specific intentions with respect to a word. It's because the words
And he's frustrated that I'm giving the obvious point in rebuttal. And anyone would know this. It's not because Black decides what the words mean. It's because dictionaries help us inform us what the meaning of terms are and what their usage is.
of the dictionary's perspective isn't relevant insofar as Black's specific intentions with respect to a word. It's because the words of the dictionary, as they're understood by the public, is what controls. That's what the judicial philosophy is about. And of course, you're citing the Supreme Court in Elk versus Watkins. That's a decision that supports my position. That's a decision that supports the English common law as the root of what the 14th Amendment means. And that's what's brought in by Watkins. So we're going to now test your theory. So what is your assertion about what the term subject to the jurisdiction thereof means? This is the fourth time I'm answering. I'm asking to
it
answer
requires
it.
complete
So 4 times, right? And so finally, right? Finally, the first thing he says, what does subject to the jurisdiction thereof mean? Complete jurisdiction. Well, that's helpful. That's fucking helpful, Ryan. On Ryan's own view, he says jurisdiction is so, who can say what it is? Oh, finally, okay. What does it mean? Complete jurisdiction. Well, that's fucking helpful. Thanks for that, Ryan.
jurisdiction, and I know that because
Wait,
when
what
you
does that
look-
mean?
When you look at what the people who wrote this phrase said, here's Senator Lyman Trumbull, and people ask for
And this is what I mean. Like, this is where I'm like, okay, you need to start worrying, Pisco, about grabbing time and making sure that you, because he's just filibustering, gasping for to try to run out the clock. And asking too many questions gives him that opportunity. And so I need to take more time when I'm talking. I'd actually be curious to see like a running clock on the amount of speaking time. But he's just like running the clock out. He's like, the reason I know this is because, I just want to know what you mean, right? I don't want to know the reason you know it. Just first, let's start with what you know.
originalism. This is the cleanest piece of originalist evidence you will
And again, it's just conclusory stuff. This is so clean. It's so good. It's so overwhelming, right? This appeals to fucking lowest common denominator. It's so clean. It's so good. My point is so good.
ever see. He was what he said. And remember, we're talking about the phrase subject
Filibuster, 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 right? The question is like what you mean by complete jurisdiction, not what, like, why you believe it. I want to know what you believe first.
to the jurisdiction thereof. And my argument, it means
What
complete
does it mean?
jurisdiction.
What does subject to the jurisdiction thereof
You
mean?
gotta let me answer the question. I'm
My definition means complete jurisdiction.
trying to frame this. My point is, subject to the jurisdiction thereof means the complete jurisdiction. And here is what Senator Trumbull, who helped write the 14th Amendment, here's what he said. Subject to
Again, I don't want to get into the Trumbull stuff because it's a rabbit hole. Yeah, you got it right. Rabbit hole. Because usually I do go down the rabbit holes. So I don't want to get into the Trumbull stuff. I'm making an active decision, and this is why I'm proud of myself. I know that people will say I'm arrogant and shit, whatever. I am really proud of myself for how I performed. I'm not taking the bait. I know it's a different context, and I'm not like biting on Trumbull stuff, on Howard stuff, and I'm just sticking to my plan.
the jurisdiction thereof means subject to the complete jurisdiction thereof. It's word for word.
What does
my
that?
position.
Wait, no. You're just
It's
replacing.
word for word
So,
my
so
position.
notice what's going on.
And again, not getting distracted on his citations and just focusing on the complete inadequacy of what he's saying.
Here. He says the meaning of subject to the jurisdiction thereof means the complete jurisdiction of the United States, correct? Complete jurisdiction. I'm asking you what that means. What does complete jurisdiction in that context mean?
Political allegiance. So
Okay. And the minute I have that, political allegiance, I'm making a show of it to say, all right, now we're going to play. Now we're going to have fun.
Political allegiance.
to give you the history lesson. This
So
is
just to be clear, let's get out of personalities.
Let me answer
You just
To give you a history lesson, right? And again, so fucking arrogant. So he wants to get right into like the Connor strategy of just saying, let me draw a fucking picture for you, dude. Let me draw this out. Is that okay if I draw this out before you say anything? And so at this point, I'm like, okay, it's a fight for the mic.
heard him say.
Hold on,
let me
you
ask
do
you a
need to- let him answer first.
political allegiance.
And Mod, I would say, listen, I like Swan a lot. But he was very, but he was, and I realized if I tried too much to interrupt, I was gonna get cucked. And so it needs to be more, when I have the time, hold it for that extra little bit longer than I otherwise would have.
Was not like an empty term back then. Remember, Peace Corps reminded you there was just a civil war. Now, one of the things that happened in the Civil War is that there was a draft in 1863. And in the draft,
So now he's talking about the draft and how people da. And again, I'm not going to get distracted.
they had to figure out who could be drafted to fight. They had an odd situation because there were foreigners living in America permanently. They had been here a long time. But when draft day came, all of a sudden, they're not American, they're French, and they don't want to fight. And the country had to figure out who was sufficiently ours. Who do we have complete jurisdiction?
Sufficiently ours. So now he's throwing out all these big words. I'm going to take him as disrespect. Sorry, that's a reference. Might be above your heads. But no, like he very much is putting a lot of bullshit in there that I could bite at, but I'm just going to stick to my plan on political allegiance.
Over who has political allegiance to this country. So what Congress did in 1863, just a few years before they ratified the 14th Amendment, is that they decided that foreigners who had signed what's called a Declaration of Intent could be
Again, just fucking filibuster.
drafted. Why? Because in the Declaration of Intent, the foreigners said that they forswore their foreign allegiances and that they wanted to be U.S. citizens. And by doing that, we now had complete jurisdiction over them because they had accepted political allegiance in this country.
You haven't explained the concept.
I just explained the concept.
No, he just didn't. He just said we had a draft, and this means that it's sufficient for political allegiance. But he hasn't explained what political allegiance is, right? And I noticed that, right? Because I'm listening. You want to know a good debate strategy? Listen to your opponent, right?
Because they had accepted political allegiance in this country.
You haven't explained the concept.
I just explained the concept.
So just to be clear, you didn't. What you just said are things that people in this situation could do to suffice political allegiance, but you haven't explained the concept of political allegiance. It sounds like what you're suggesting is political allegiance is some sort of commitment in favor of the government of the United States. Is that correct?
Yeah, there are things in our government.
So yeah, and then immediately tries to take to filibuster some more. So to try to bog down on his history lessons
that require political allegiance. For example, you cannot be charged with treason unless you...
Okay, there are things like, how is that relevant, right? How is that anything but a derail? Things need political allegiance. Treason, let me spew everything I know about what you need for political allegiance, right? You can't be charged with treason without political allegiance. You can't be drafted without political allegiance, right? So we are trying to understand political allegiance in the context of birthright citizenship, and the dude is just desperate to filibuster, eat up clock, so that we can't have a full elaboration of the concept.
Owe the government allegiance. That makes sense, because if you don't owe the government allegiance, you can't be treasonous against the government. Similarly,
who's asked about treason? Similarly, this or
you
that.
can't be drafted unless you owe the government political allegiance, because it doesn't make sense. You don't owe.
And understand the circularity here, right? Because later on, Ryan will say, "Well, why do U.S. citizens automatically have political allegiance?" And he says, "Well, because they sign up for the draft." And now he's saying, well, being able to be signed up for the draft is itself a consequence of political, is it right? Do you understand? It both proves political allegiance, and you can only do it like to people who are politically, like it just seems at both ends of the, I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but I think that there's a circularity problem there.
The government your military service unless you owe them political allegiance. And this was definitely on the mind of the people who wrote this document in 1866, because it happened 3 years earlier in 1863. So this is definitely what they were thinking about at the time they wrote these words.
This is how extreme Ryan's interpretation is.
And so I go right to, rather than bite on the representations about the draft law, rather than bite on the 1866 Civil Rights Act, Ryan is extreme, and this is why. Because his interpretation of the word is extreme, right? So I had my goal. I wasn't distracted by the historical ramble. I wasn't biting on his on the difference between on the draft law and why it doesn't mean that what he thinks it means, or the Civil Rights Act of 1866 and why it doesn't mean what he says it means. I'm focused and I don't get distracted. That's why I'm proud of myself.
So this is definitely what they were thinking about at the time they wrote these words.
This is how extreme Ryan's interpretation is when he views political allegiance as the definition of jurisdiction through these confused and ultimately futile references to the debate which he's misrepresenting.
Okay, so like, and again, just quickly saying he's lying about this. Let's not get into it.
Political allegiance, if that were the basis of subject to the jurisdiction thereof, freed black slaves wouldn't necessarily be have political allegiance to the United States government and therefore wouldn't be freed. But everyone agrees that at a bare minimum, the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment gave citizenship to those people if it turns on political allegiance. That is precisely what the founding generation of this amendment wanted to avoid, an elastic test where the states would determine what political allegiance means, or the Congress would determine political allegiance to be some kind of loyalty to the United States. This is hogwash. What they wanted was a clean, simple rule according to the English common law. And what the English common law viewed allegiance as, the term of art, it's not what he's sort of importing in, was if you were born on the king's land, you were a subject of the king. That's what they meant. Allegiance and protection are one in one. And it implies a duty to obey the king's laws. Now, who is absent that duty and that protection? Ambassadors, diplomatic people, foreign conquering armies, and in the case of America, the American Indian tribes. So that, of course, makes complete sense. What doesn't make sense is an interpretation of jurisdiction, which means political allegiance, which wouldn't even guarantee citizenship to freed slaves. That, of course, must be a preposterous reading of the 14th Amendment.
Pisco said a bunch of things there that are dead wrong.
And I'm very proud with that answer. It gets through a lot, right? One, it makes sense of the term allegiance that does appear in a lot of these different opinions, but it just is a term of art that references the same thing that I mean by jurisdiction, which is a requirement to follow the law, the duties of the law, right? That's so it makes sense of that, right? It brings up the English common law and how that's based on the rules of subjecthood and the king's protection going hand in hand with the king's allegiance. And then once again, cementing that his ruling wouldn't necessarily apply to freed slaves, which everyone agrees from a results perspective was the bare minimum that the citizenship clause did. And so we must reject it. So I think that I did that in a very pithy way, and I'm proud of that answer.
I'm going to try to correct them. I'm going to do it briefly, and then we might zoom in on them. But I'm just, if you don't mind, let me work through because you had quite a monologue there. The first is Pisco asserts that my definition would not necessarily have given citizenship to freed black slaves. That's absurd. If you were here for multiple generations,
and again, multiple generations, I mean, Ryan must know, right? Ryan must know that there were people imported into the United States throughout this time period who were slaves. If he doesn't know that, then he's completely ignorant of history. So pretending as though, okay, the freed slaves only included people who were here for multiple generations is so ahistorical, right? It's just not true.
The question is, who do you owe allegiance to? Is it to some potentate in Africa in a country that you've never been to? Is it really reasonable that you would be charged with treason or drafted into the military to a country you've never seen? No, obviously, the allegiance...
And look how he sets himself up for the later point that we have about slaves. He says, oh, would it really make sense that you get drafted into a country that you've never seen or heard? And he's later on going to get fucked in the butt by the notion that slaves who are illegally imported in the United States without any choice in the matter would somehow be aligned to a country they didn't want to go to by people who violated the laws of that country to bring you there in the first place, right? And so the very own standard, he's saying it's so ridiculous, right? That you could be subject to a king or a leader that you've never even met and never wanted to be a part of, right? Putting aside that this applies to babies, right? The whole thing is fucked because this whole thing is supposed to apply to babies and not to people. So it really just is. Anyone who tells you Ryan won this debate, and that's why it's so cringe to see him being like, oh my God, the MAGA voters fucking voted me in and I won. Like, give him that one, all right, dude? It's so embarrassing.
Was to the United States. There's no question about that.
Wait, we're talking about the kids. We're talking about the kids.
You had a very long list.
We're talking about the kids.
You had a very long list. Let me give the highlights and then we can zoom in.
We're talking about the kids. We're talking about the kids.
We're talking
to a country you've never seen? No, obviously, the allegiance was to the United States. There's no question about that.
Wait, we're talking about the kids. We're talking about the kids.
You had a very long list.
We're talking about the kids.
You had a very long list. Let me give the highlights and then we can zoom in.
We're talking about the kids, not the parents.
We can zoom in where you'd like afterwards, Pisco. Second, Pisco asserted that the English common law should govern. This is also ridiculous because he said it himself. The English common law was not about birthright citizenship. It was about birthright subjecthood. You were a subject.
Yes, that's what we imported, right? And look at what he says after this, right?
Of the king. You could never expatriate. You could never renounce your citizenship. You were loyal forever. And guess who that applied to? All the Americans pre-revolution. And then we fought a revolution specifically to get rid of that rule.
No, we didn't. Did we fight a revolution to get rid of the rule? Or did we fight the revolution to become independent and have a new country? Right? He's claiming that the Revolutionary War was fought to get rid of the rule of who is a subject of the king. No. Read the Declaration of Independence. It doesn't have to do with, oh, wow, it's so unfair that we are automatically considered citizens of the British Empire or subject of the British Empire. That's not why we fought the fucking war. It's so laughable, right?
Because if we were subjects of the king, the revolution is obviously illegal.
That's not what the war was about.
So the idea
That's
that
not what the
this
war was
translated
about.
over is absolutely nonsense. And then the biggest whopper, it's a technical one, but it's just wrong. Pisco said that Congress can't change citizenship. They wanted to have it set.
No, and again, he's trying to claim that I think that Congress can't adjust rules of naturalization. With respect to what was in the 14th Amendment, that rule, they didn't want to change that. But I'm not implying, and he must know that, right? He must know that I recognize that Congress can create additional categories of naturalization. Does he really think, like, this is why I say he's bad faith. He can't think that I think that.
In stone by the 14th Amendment, which is just factually incorrect.
No, change. So Congress isn't able to adjust what the 14th Amendment means through statute. One of the reasons they were trying to pass a constitutional provision was, one, to overturn Dred Scott, but they didn't use the words, and only freed slaves shall be citizens, right? They used more general language. And of course, they didn't want the language that they were specifically including in the 14th Amendment to be able to be trivially adjusted by either Congress or the states deciding different rules on political leaders. But there's something really important we need to.
No, but we need to. I have to follow up on that. I have to follow up on that.
And again, this pause for no reason.
Focus.
It actually works out in my favor because you'll see what. Why?
Hit our time. So let's take a break for a second.
Okay.
That was the end of the first round. I guess there isn't a bill. Yeah, well, no, you guys will stay up here for a minute. But we're just going to give just a couple seconds. You want to grab some water, take a break for a second. And then I'm going to ask you guys in between here, while they're setting up this next round, how's it going so far? Pisco, you seem to be getting a little frustrated with him. You have a specific line you're trying to go down. It feels like he's
this is great for me to be able to frame and contextualize the conversation. And so I really love this opportunity.
Yep.
I think we're going to get into some hypotheticals, but we're also going to focus in on the scope of who the 14th Amendment applies to. And my strategy is, once we get into the fact that it's referring to children and not their parents, I think he's got nowhere to go with his political allegiance thing. In what sense can a baby owe political allegiance in the way that Ryan is implying?
And then, Ryan, what do you think is happening here? It feels like you're trying to get a little more historical context and you keep getting cut off.
I'm delighted about how this is going because the question that Pisco raised is what's the original meaning? And the original meaning of the Constitution is determined by the history. Pisco doesn't seem prepared to discuss the history.
Again, getting into personalities as though I'm not willing to discuss history. Like, just lying, right? Lying about this entire thing. I'm like, the whole central premise of what I'm saying is look to the Civil War, look to what they wanted to do, look at what the Supreme Court case law is outside. Like, the dude just is blatantly lying and getting into, he's unprepared. When the guy's like, he must know, or he's so incompetent so as to misquote Wong Kim Ark. It's such like bullshit bad faith tactics, dude. It's so crazy.
So in a sense, he's conceded the debate.
He's conceded the debate in a sense because he doesn't want to talk about history. When we're talking about history this entire time, right? We're talking about the context of when these words were written. It's like the people just declaring victory. You know the people who do this, right?
I think that's wild.
That's not for you. Take another sip of water. I think we're getting ready to roll it again. 25 minutes, correct, guys? We'll put 25 minutes, on the clock, and you guys will have your second open debate begins now.
So let's focus on the subject of the 14th Amendment. So just to be clear, does it refer, I'm asking you the question, you can answer it. Does it refer to the children, that is the persons born, or does it refer to their parents? Just answer that.
I will answer this question on the guarantee
He doesn't answer the question.
that I get to ask mine when I'm done.
Sure, I can guarantee you'll ask yours. Okay. Answer his question.
So with the 14th Amendment, it says if
With the 14th Amendment, it says,
you're born and subject to the jurisdiction, and I've asserted that means complete jurisdiction. The
okay, is that answering the question?
political allegiance of a child follows their parent.
So it's kind of implied that he's recognizing that I'm correct, but he doesn't go out and say it. He just says it's technically not an answer to the question. Now, I'm going to take it as one, but just notice it. He just like, he should just say, of course, yes, of course, right? Child or parent, right? Yeah, that's the question is what it's calling for. And he says, but children have the allegiance of their parents. Okay, so now we have a problem, right? And here's a huge problem.
So every child has the same political allegiance of their parents, which
So the minute he says that, right? The minute he says that,
is why you look to the parents to determine what their political allegiance
So why is
is.
Wong Kim Ark?
Obviously.
Was Wong Kim Ark a citizen? This is the
Okay, right?
Case that we're talking about, unless you're proposing overturning Wong Kim Ark, that case, their parents were subjects of the King of China. And yet the Supreme Court, you claim history, you claim precedent. The Supreme Court said, notwithstanding the fact that Wong Kim Ark's parents are subject to the Emperor of China, that nonetheless he is subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. You have a huge problem, don't you, Ryan? And
So notice that, right? Control F, Emperor. Oh wait, no, wrong. Control F, Emperor. Right? So Ryan claims the political allegiance follows the parents. But Wong Kim Ark, right? Wong Kim Ark, their parents are subject to the Emperor of China. So notice this, right? Ryan, complete fucking imbecile on this. If it's the case that political allegiance follows your parents, right? From parents, Wong Kim Ark parents are subjects of the Emperor of China. Therefore, Wong Kim Ark, no political allegiance to a USA when born, right? A massive contradiction. A massive contradiction. And anyone who has any familiarity to this topic must see that, right? He says political allegiance follows.
overturning Wong.
So every child has the same political allegiance of their parents, which is
The same political allegiance except for Wong Kim Ark?
why you look to the parents to determine what their political allegiance
So why is Wong Kim Ark?
Obviously.
Why was Wong Kim Ark a citizen? This is the case that we're talking about. Unless you're proposing overturning Wong Kim Ark, that case, their parents were subjects of the King of China. And yet the Supreme Court, you claim history, you claim precedent. The Supreme Court said, notwithstanding the fact that Wong Kim Ark's parents are subject to the Emperor of China, that nonetheless he is subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. You have a huge problem, don't you, Ryan?
And Wong Kim Ark was wrongly reasoned, but
Wrongly reasoned, right? Wrongly reasoned. So now who's more to precedent? Now who's saying, oh, it's overwhelming. Wong Kim Ark was wrongly reasoned. So are you trying to overturn Wong Kim Ark or not, Ryan? What are you trying to do? So this is the about face. The reason why he's trying to claim history, the mantle of history, but you can't, because the executive order that Trump passed is flatly contradicted by Wong Kim Ark. But he has to play this kind of like impossible shell game where we're not overturning Wong Kim Ark. We're just like fundamentally destroying its reasoning. But there's a bigger problem here, which is even if you try to say that Wong Kim Ark is consistent, it's whether or not it's consistent with Trump's executive order, right? It's definitely contradictory with Ryan's point, right? So you can claim that Wong Kim Ark is not contradicted by executive order. It's insane to claim that, but fine. You can try to do that as a face-saving maneuver. But it's definitely contradictory with your point you just gave about political allegiance following the parent. Because if that's true, then Wong Kim Ark has no political allegiance to the United States, and therefore, it's not just that Wong Kim Ark was wrongly reasoned, it was wrongly decided.
here's the great thing, and this is the cleverness of what President Trump did. Wong Kim
Again, just trying to fucking suck the dick of the audience. So clever. Trump is so clever.
Ark, even though it was technically a bad decision,
It was technically a bad decision. Technically, I thought you were like claiming the mantle of history. Oh, oops. I guess they got it wrong.
only held one single question. If someone is here who legally and permanently, despite not being a citizen,
We already know that that's wrong because that's not what they decided. They decided on grounds more broad than that, as I showed you.
does their children get citizenship? And President Trump knew about this. His lawyers told him and anticipated it. And if you look at President Trump's
So just trying to glaze, at this point, desperately playing optics about Trump being so fucking smart. He's so smart because they briefed him on, like Trump gives a shit about this legal reasoning. Like he was so clever in coming up with this. Like Trump's a fucking idiot. His brain is disintegrating. And so Ryan is just dick sucking the Trump MAGA audience and the Proud Boys in the fucking audience.
January 2025 executive order that limited birthright citizenship, he put it on all fours with Wong Kim Ark. He said the only people who will not get birthright citizenship going forward, who used to get it, are in situations where the mother is here illegally or temporarily, and the father.
And again, just filibustering to talk about the executive order and run out the clock because he's so fucking outclassed and unprepared.
Does not have
So if you come
status.
here illegally-
So Wong Kim Ark held exactly that. It's not.
And so now, however, him talking about people who come here illegally. So the minute he says that,
Going forward, who used to get it, are in situations where the mother is here illegally or temporarily, and the father does not have
So if you come
status.
here illegally-
So Wong Kim Ark held
so I hear the term illegally, and so now I have another example that I'm going to deploy on Ryan. This is his undoing in the question answer part as well.
exactly that. It's not a problem.
So if you come here illegally, you're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. That's your contention, correct?
You're not subject to
And he knows that when I'm signaling this, that I'm going somewhere with this.
the complete jurisdiction.
Okay, so here's just a question for you. After Thomas Jefferson's administration, was it illegal to import slaves into the country?
Was it illegal to import slaves into the country?
Yes, that's a question.
I don't know the answer.
The answer was yes.
Okay.
We banned the importation of slaves. And
And again, Ryan claiming like he doesn't know this. Ryan brought up this point, or either Ryan or his co-host in the debate, I assume he was paying attention, in the American Moral Proposition, they brought up, well, Jefferson, he banned the importation of slaves. And so I thought it was ridiculous that he would try to be like, oh, I don't know. I don't really know if Jefferson, like, don't you remember us talking about it in the debate that you participated in like a few months ago?
notwithstanding,
Slaves into the country?
yes, that's a question.
I don't know the answer.
The answer was yes.
Okay.
We banned the importation of slaves. And notwithstanding they making it illegal to import slaves into the country, people still did it. And so my question for you, Ryan, is the following. For people who were brought into this country illegally against the United States law in violation of the international slave laws that banned the importation of slaves into this country, are their children citizens, yes or no?
Obviously, yes.
But they came here illegally. They came here illegally.
No, they were taken here illegally.
Now, notice here, Ryan immediately tries to get off this point. I'm actually thankful for the moderator because the moderator is the one, because we get off this point. So kudos to Ryan. Listen, I'm fair and balanced in distracting the conversation long enough to get off this like killer point, because I did promise I would answer his question. And so he's able to successfully navigate away from this very, very weak point just for now. And it's actually the moderator who brings it up later on. And that's when he gets totally crushed, because you guys all understand what's happening, right? If it's the travel that makes someone, I don't know, because they're so fucking abused on the way over here, that gives them allegiance to America, it doesn't make much sense. But by the way, that's part of the rationale of why we should like have a more firm border now, is that there's so much human trafficking across the border. So that would apply to them as well, being brought here, taken against their will in the United States, or coyotes, that kind of shit, right? So at a bare minimum, it would cover them. But even putting that aside, just conceptually for a second, the point that we will get to is, how can it be fucking possible that someone who's taken against their will to a country they've never been to somehow has political allegiance to that country, where his coming into the country is itself against the laws of that country? Like, it defies all reason. It defies any fucking precedent whatsoever. Defies common sense to think such an illegally kidnapped slave brought illegally to a country now magically has political allegiance to the very country he was illegally brought, right? And so Ryan is realizing how fucked he is. And, you know, he does dodge it because I did promise to answer his question. But the moderator ultimately brings it back up and fucking crucifies him.
What Pisco's conflating are people today who crossed the border illegally on purpose to have anchor babies in the country,
I'm not
with
conflating
people
that.
who were victimized
Anchor babies. He's just trying to fucking signal again to MAGA.
and trafficked to come over
No,
here against
no,
the
that's
will.
it. First of all,
and
that's-
I think that the conflation there is obvious.
So he's desperate to get off this
and the
point.
ramifications of the conflation are obvious. I'd like to ask my question.
Right. So effective here. I promised I would answer it. I'm trying to seem reasonable. I did promise that I would answer his question, and so that's why I do it. So good on Ryan here. This is a good move to get off the point where he is by far the weakest. But thank God that the moderator remembers, because holy shit, what a dunk that was.
If you don't mind. Earlier, you said, I'm paraphrasing because I didn't write down the exact quote.
And this is a weak little attempt at an internal critique on whether Congress has naturalization authority. I completely fucking obliterate his attempt at a dunk here too. He doesn't even fully commit to it, and it's just beautiful.
But you said something along the lines of, Congress didn't want to leave the issue open. They didn't want future Congresses to muck around and change citizenship. Is that right?
No, I didn't say in every respect. Of course, under Article 1, Congress has a naturalization authority to make additional rules of citizenship. But with respect to the specific birthright citizenship issue that they were trying to correct after Dred Scott led to a fucking, excuse my French, civil war in this country, that they didn't want that to be touched by states or by Congress.
And in 1868, were Indians qualifying for birthright citizens?
They were not qualified for birthright citizenship under the Constitution because of their specific constitutional status and the fact that they're considered their own little islands of sovereignty. It's a sort of a peculiarity of American law that the English common law didn't have to deal
Because
with.
they lack political.
Right. So the point here is, how come American Indians who are not in the English common law, why do we treat them differently under subject to the jurisdiction thereof? Right. Because the English common law didn't really have to address them. But the answer is on the same kind of grounds as the ambassadors and on the foreign armies. Is, in general, American Indians don't have the same obligation to follow the laws of the United States and the various states. They have this kind of like odd dual sovereignty. They can sometimes be subject to certain of Congress's rules and laws and shit and their own treaties, right? That they have as parties with the United States government. But in general, it's this kind of like pseudo sovereignty, this kind of quasi sovereignty. It's the exception that proves the rule. In other words, right? It's the thing that the UK theory of king's jurisdiction didn't have to deal with, because they didn't have the same sort of existence of these native tribes at the time that all these rules are being developed in England. So it's the exception that proves the rule. It's because of the sovereignty that American Indians have in their tribal lands, etc.
allegiance to the United States, maybe?
Because they're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States.
They're not subject to the complete jurisdiction of the United States.
No.
Could you charge them with a crime if they robbed a bank? Of course. So could you charge them with a crime if they assaulted someone? Of course. But you could not draft them. They were not subject to the complete allegiance.
Again, it is an oversimplification. Yes, there are times in which the laws can apply to American Indians, the general law, but that is not as a matter of course on their tribal lands. And when they're born, pursuant to their tribal treaties and pursuant to the arrangements they, who are treated almost as foreign nations, have with America, it's that general relationship which prevents them from having birthright citizenship by virtue of the 14th Amendment
of the United States. He's conceding the point.
It's not a concession. Elk versus Watkins fits with Wong Kim Ark. The case that he's citing about American Indians is because they are, in fact, treated differently, much the same as, like, for example, diplomats are in different kinds of ways. They're their own sovereign islands in the United States. It's a peculiarity of American jurisprudence, but it proves the point. It proves the point that subject to the jurisdiction, in general, means subject to the laws, the authority of the United States. And what he's told you is, and you're going to answer this question, that Congress, if it wanted to, could create a test for political allegiance and thereby change the meaning of the 14th Amendment, yes?
I mean,
could they or not? Could they or not?
Could they? They already have.
So that they change what political allegiance means, and what he's making reference to here is the laws of naturalizations. Congress passed a law naturalizing American Indians by virtue of U.S. law as opposed to the 14th Amendment. But that wasn't them changing political allegiance. That was them naturalizing, right? So he's now conflating anytime Congress uses its naturalization authority, they're now changing what jurisdiction means and political allegiance means, which is, of course, an additional conflation. That is, that any use of naturalization authority necessarily invokes political allegiance, which isn't the case.
What Pisco told you is that Indians did not get birthright citizenship in 1868 because they were their own sovereigns. They did not have
Because they're not
political
I am
subject to the
sick.
jurisdiction.
But then, in 1924, Congress passed a law that made it so that they did get birthright citizenship. And now they are completely subject to American jurisdiction.
No, they're not, right? No, they're not. And just our case law proves the point, right? There still is sovereignty, sort of the peculiar spheres of sovereignty for reservations. That still exists. What he's saying flies in the face of, like, even recent case law on the relationship between American Indians and the United States government. So they weren't eliminating the reservation system when they naturalized American Indians. Right. Tribes are treated differently to this day. So do you understand how stupid you have to be to think that this guy made any coherent point whatsoever? Every other word out of his mouth is either flatly wrong or contradicted by not even like contestable precedent.
They do have complete allegiance, and now they get birthright citizenship.
So American Indians now get birthright citizenship by virtue of a law that Congress passed using their naturalization authorities under Article 1, right? You can get citizenship through many different means. You can either get it through the 14th Amendment directly, but Congress can also just like make a law to they can sometimes even pass a law, a private law that applies to one person. They don't really do it anymore, but they could pass a law if they wanted to that said Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a citizen of the United States. They could do that, right? So what Ryan is proposing is, don't you see, when Congress used its naturalization authority under Article 1 to give citizenship to American Indians born on tribal lands, what they were doing was fundamentally altering the dual sovereignty role of American Indians, which is absurd. That's not what they were doing. What they were doing was nothing more or less than giving naturalization. I don't know if they have considered a tribal membership citizenship, but they are still members of their tribes, yes. But they are given U.S. citizenship. But it's not through the 14th Amendment. It's through Article 1 naturalization authorities. So, I mean, this guy is he's all over the place here and just making shit up about the relationship between American Indians and U.S. government, and that somehow it was changed by the naturalization laws, other than doing what the naturalization laws do, which is to just make them citizens.
Not only can Congress do this, Congress already has.
So he's, oh yes, Congress defined the political allegiance such that now American Indians have it.
Congress do that in the 1860s?
Right.
Can Congress do this? Congress already has.
Why would Congress do that in the 1860s? Why would Congress make a constitutional provision, the citizenship clause? That could
right. So, and understand the point I'm making here. If all Congress was doing in the 14th Amendment was saying, hey, Congress, figure it out, they didn't have to do that, right? Congress already has this authority to naturalize people. And so if Ryan's interpretation is correct, then the 14th Amendment with respect to the citizenship clause is doing what all it's doing is saying Congress can define however it wants the rules of naturalization. But they could already do that under Article 1. So it's totally redundant. Perhaps the only thing it would do differently is overturn Dred Scott. But they didn't have to write all that shit to overturn Dred Scott. They could have just said, hey, Dred Scott overturned, or members of the black race are allowed to be citizens, not just white people, right? They didn't have to use this general language. They could have just overturned Dred Scott and no way more. And that was one of the initial drafts of the 14th Amendment, was specifically just like limited at overturning Dred Scott. They didn't do that, right? So you'd have to believe that the framers were just trying to say, hey, Congress, you figure it out. And they did all this, right, just to say, Congress, you define it however you want, which of course is absurd, right? That's what I'm saying here. Why would they do that?
In the 1860s.
Not only can Congress do this, Congress already has.
Why would Congress do that in the 1860s? Why would Congress make a constitutional provision, the citizenship clause, that could be so trivially adjusted by just passing a law that says, oh, now we consider these people to be political? Do you understand how much abuse could be done if all of a sudden Democrats get in charge of the United States government? They say anyone who supported January 6th, we're construing them as not having political allegiance to the United States, and therefore their kids don't get birthright citizenship, putting aside the fact that the 14th Amendment applies to children, not to their parents. Why would they do that? They just fought a civil war to settle an issue. They didn't want to have future generations question the war that they just fought and the question of membership into a club. So of course, the American Indian exception proves the rule. It proves the rule that being subject to the jurisdiction of the United States means being subject to the power and legal authority of the United States, which of course the children of such people are. And if you take his interpretation, there's no limiting principle there. Even lawful permanent residents, right? They don't innately have, they're not subject to the political allegiance in the way that he's suggesting. And so it doesn't have any limiting principle. It means whatever Congress says political allegiance means. And that can't be what the Civil War generation wanted to do to settle this important question and just for whatever Congress or whatever state governments wanted to find political allegiance to be. That isn't what they meant.
Pisco just took a very long time to say he couldn't possibly imagine how Congress could do something that I just proved that Congress did. So I don't really care whether—
You didn't prove that Congress did that. You proved that Congress uses naturalization authorities to give citizenship to American Indians. But again, that is totally consistent with what I said. It isn't changing political allegiance. It's providing citizenship.
Pisco can imagine how they can do it because the historical record proves that it actually happened.
So understand the equivocation here and the conflation. He's saying anytime there's naturalization, there is de facto political allegiance adjustment. But that's just not true. Just because, Congress could pass a private law granting citizenship to one person, and it doesn't entail them granting political allegiance in the way he's suggesting. He's making citizenship, not just subject to the jurisdiction, mean political allegiance. He's now making citizenship itself mean political allegiance. And so now everything is being swallowed into political allegiance, which is ridiculous.
Pisco, if we're doing hypotheticals, let me ask you. No. You just talked for like 10 minutes, brother. Let me ask you this. If America tomorrow passed a law that said we no longer honor diplomatic immunity, we no longer care if diplomats are immune, we're going to prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law every single time. On your definition, would that change birthright citizenship?
It wouldn't change birthright citizenship. You're adjusting one of the exceptions of subject to the jurisdiction thereof, but those are in the exceptions, right? You're not changing it for the vast swaths.
Pisco only has 2 exceptions: ambassadors and
Line. He heard me say 3.
now they both changed.
So 3 exceptions. And what's preferable? A rule where you can adjust at the margins about invasion and about American Indians and diplomats, or a rule where the entire thing is up for the next generation to decide? Of course, that's absurd. And no, in the 20th century, they didn't give American Indians political allegiance by statute. They used their Article 1 authorities to give automatic naturalization to people born on American Indian reservations. That's what they did then. And if
that's what political allegiance is,
at a bare minimum, you should accept.
That's what political allegiance is. Political allegiance is naturalization. It's so absurd. This guy was a clown on stage, and he's saying citizenship equals political allegiance. When of course it doesn't. Of course it doesn't.
Though, that if we're looking to what Congress does, the statutes that Congress passed in the 1940s, 1950s, which includes their interpretation of Wong Kim Ark, that when they passed those laws, regardless of whether you think, Ryan, in your majesty, that Wong Kim Ark was wrongly decided, the members who made the statutes in the 1940s and 50s, they understood what Wong Kim Ark did. They understood that they were incorporating the English common law as Wong Kim Ark says they did. You can't cite the Supreme Court and say that you're the one grounded in history by ignoring the reasoning of the Supreme Court and the later Congresses that ratified that interpretation into law.
So my point here now is, even if we were to accept your ridiculous proposal, understand that there are statutes that have been passed that incorporate their then existing understandings of Wong Kim Ark. So you have this decision and thought process that Wong Kim Ark was badly reasoned. Okay, fine. But even if that were true, in the 20th century, they passed a law that incorporated their then existing understanding of Wong Kim Ark. So you're fucked, because even if you were right on the constitutional issue, the statutes passed by Congress incorporated their then existing understanding of Wong Kim Ark. And look at the slimy maneuver he's about to do.
So even if it were the case that we would accept your preposterous, elastic, political allegiance means anything you want, and you'll notice he didn't say that it would be impermissible for Congress to define political allegiance such that it would apply to anyone who supported Trump.
There's nothing about what happy that Pisco
would limit that situation.
I'm so happy that Pisco wants to get into the history, but he picked the wrong era. He's talking.
So now this is another slimy, dishonest tactic that Ryan does as a general strategy because he's a dishonest debater in bad faith, right? So, and again, I like Ryan and we have great times and I have no problem saying I enjoyed spending time with him. He's a dishonest debater. So he's going to pretend that by my focus on the statutes in the 20th century, incorporating an understanding of the 19th century holding of Wong Kim Ark, that therefore my entire argument turns on 20th century understandings. When it was clear what I was saying was with respect to the statutes passed in the 20th century. And so now he's trying to say, oh, look at how silly, he's again appealing to the lowest common denominator and saying, Pisco is ignoring the 1860s. He just keeps saying it as though it's the case, when it couldn't be further from the truth. And he's pretending that, oh, he just focuses on the early stuff, or on later stuff, on 20th century stuff. He knows what I'm doing. He's lying and being dishonest and slimy.
Talking about the 1930s, but the question is, what's so happy that people
and again, I said 1940s and 50s. He says 1930s like twice.
To get into the history, but he picked the wrong era. He's talking about the 1930s, but the question is, what did these words mean circa 1868?
Not under statute.
Now, here's what's interesting.
Not under statute. So he hears me, not under statute. Under statute, what matters is when the statute was passed. That's originalism, right? Is when the law specifically was passed. So it's clear that he knows, he just heard that. I'm referencing the 20th century with respect to the 20th century statutes.
About that. In 1873, the Attorney General wrote.
And so now he's just trying to monologue and run the clock, right? Now he's just trying to say as much historical thing that, oh, people will say, I had quotes, he didn't have quotes. And therefore I win because I just monologue and say random shit that doesn't matter, because it doesn't.
The word jurisdiction must be understood to mean absolute or complete jurisdiction, such as the United States had.
No, I do think he's lying. I think that he knows. No, momentum. I do think he's lying. Yes. I talked to him afterwards, and and it's clear that he knows that I was correct. And when I was referencing those statutes, that I was invoking originalism with respect to those statutes. I talked to him afterwards. He lied. And if you ask him, he's going to do that. But no, he knows.
Citizens before the adoption of the amendment. Complete jurisdiction. My point. Then, in 1885, there were several examples where secretaries of state and the Department of Justice denied birthright citizenship in situations where, for example, a German couple was here temporarily, they had a kid, they took the kid back to Germany, and then they wrote a letter that said, is our child a citizen? And our government in 1885 said no. This is after the 14th Amendment was ratified. Clearly, they didn't believe in universal birthright citizenship then. There's another story.
And again, just like cherry picking different instances of different like executive officers doing shit, or there's like an opinion also by a DOJ person at one time who said something like, these are all cherry picks against a tide of overwhelming historical practice of the executive branch to grant citizenship. Like, that's why we're all here, right? We're all here because something different is about to happen. And the overwhelming practice has been the opposite. But he's trying to pretend that the overwhelming practice has been in his favor when, if it was, why would we be here?
Devereaux, I forgot her first name, I'm sorry. She was an Irish woman. She was trying to enter New York, and she was held up. They were processing the paperwork. Her boat was held in the harbor, and she went into labor. Because the people there were not monsters, they took her to a hospital in New York where she gave birth.
Filibuster. This is no different than when Counterpoints is like, so for Israel, remember Moses. Like, it's no different. It's just running the clock out. It's pathetic.
Her child had birthright citizenship according to PISCO. But did the government think so? No. The government said that she had to go back to Ireland. Her kid was not a citizen because she was only here temporarily, and she had to take the kid with her. So clearly, in 1800s, where PISCO does not want to talk about, because he's doing 1930s, this was not the understanding of these words. And while PISCO wanted to throw my originalism in my face, what I'm actually interested in is the original meaning of these words, which is why I'm talking about evidence from that
very
time period.
sneaky tactics here from Ryan. So he pretends that I'm unmoored from the 1860s. No, we can talk about the 1860s all you want. When I was referencing an alternative argument, which is the 20th century enactment of laws incorporating then understanding of the Supreme Court precedent of Wonkum Ark, obviously with respect to the statute, what I'm talking about is originalism on that score, not the Constitution. So sneaky to say that I'm ignoring originalism for purpose of a statute that he knows is with reference to the 1940s and 1950s. But no, take the rule in the 1860s.
Yeah, and so he knows, right? He knows right there. He knows the arguments, right? He read the brief. He knows there's a statute argument as well. And we talked about it before as well. So he knows that when I'm referencing the statutory argument, that it's originalism on that score. So no, he absolutely lied.
What was understood by the time of those people was that they were incorporating the then existing laws of birth by territory. That's what they were doing. And this isn't just some thing coming out of Zeus's head. That was the prevailing English common law rule that you can see out of state courts in New York and various different states of the Union that recognized at the time the prevailing rule. The prevailing rule was that, yes, even temporary visitors are subject to allegiance in the sense of protection, in the sense of they are bound by the laws of the government of the United States. And his interpretation would lead to absurdities. And here's a hypothetical, Ryan. If Congress wanted to, could it define political allegiance under the 14th Amendment such that no alien is politically aligned to the United States? Yes or no?
No alien?
Yes, no alien.
Yeah, they could do that.
They could do that, right? They could say all aliens don't have political allegiance and therefore are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. It's preposterous on any view of the contemporaneous writings of the framers of the 14th Amendment. They all say that that's not true, that even temporary Chinese visitors, right? So his rule would completely make a mockery of those understandings.
This is what Ryan is trying to tell you, that
I'm 6 foot.
Congress, with a stroke of a pen, after they passed an amendment, after they fought a bloody civil war, could just get rid of birthright citizenship for anyone who's not a U.S. citizen. But that can't have been, just like
not going backwards, going
that can't have been.
And this is another slimy thing, right? So it's clear what I'm saying here is the following.
Congress, with a stroke of a pen, after they passed an amendment, after they fought a bloody civil war, could just get rid of birthright citizenship for anyone who's not a U.S. citizen. But that can't have been, just like
not going backwards, going
that can't have been what the founding generation of the 14th Amendment wanted to do. They already had laws that allowed for this kind of citizenship through the blood and the parentage of the people. So they couldn't have wanted it for it to be possible for Congress to just edit out the 14th Amendment. I know that's what a lot of you people want to do, is just get rid of the 14th Amendment and pretend it doesn't exist. But if they had wanted the 14th Amendment to be as elastic as Ryan is suggesting, they just would have overturned Dred Scott and left the rest of Congress of future years. That's not what they were were trying to do.
See, PISCO keeps saying this is what they were not trying to do, but again and again, I've given you historical evidence of why that is exactly what.
He's just saying he gave evidence. Like he's not. He's pointing to individual actions taken by certain executive officials that are like on the margin. Okay, some woman is in labor, induced, and she's forced to go into the fucking place, and who the fuck knows where there was no court decision. Like it's all garbage Heritage Foundation talking points that doesn't make sense given the consensus in the 1860s.
Happened. So I don't know why PISCO's hypotheticals would possibly outweigh the examples I've given you of what the government actually did in 1863, in 1885, in 1973, over and over again. And by the way, this wasn't something that was like frozen in time. If you flash forward into the 1930s that PISCO is so fond of, you
40s.
Again, the 1930s that he's so fond of. So this is why you know he's lying. He just heard me mention that he just did a slimy debate tactic to pretend as though my argument is all grounded in 1940s because of the statutory argument. And he once again is insisting that I'm only grounded in 20th century stuff. It's a lie. He's a bad faith debater. He's a fucking hack.
We had a guest work program where millions of Mexicans came to the country to do guest work. And while they were here, it is estimated that 400,000 children were born. After that program ended due to the Great Depression, there was a mass repatriation, which was largely voluntary, but did include many deportations, and not a single claim for birthright citizenship of those children inured.
So the lack of claim by individuals proves what the 14th Amendment means. Can you even hear yourself fucking talk? By this logic, right, the Second Amendment doesn't mean an individual right to have guns because there were so many laws that violated the Second Amendment as we understand it today. Like, the guy's a fucking hack.
Because it wasn't thought that they had birthright citizenship because they were
If we're going by government practice, you have to agree that the overwhelming government practice throughout the entirety of since the 14th Amendment has been to grant birthright citizenship precisely in the way I suggest. That is the overwhelming practice, correct?
Since the 1950s.
No,
but
before
they
then.
were,
No, and again, no, that's not true. That's not true. It's how I suggested.
But keep in mind,
Wait, no, is the
I'm
answer
asking
yes,
what-
Ryan?
When I cite government practice, I'm not citing it because I say government practice controls everything going forward. I'm
Yeah, so why are you citing it?
citing it because I'm asking what is the original
Thank you,
meaning
Aiko.
of this provision. So I'm trying to give you examples of what the government believed at this time.
At this time, no, you just cited a program from the Great Depression, you fucking liar.
1868, what the government was doing in 1970 or 1980.
You just cited 1970. You just cited Great Depression. The guy's all over the place. It's fucking pathetic.
Has very little
in the
to do with that
1860s
question, whereas what they were doing in 1873 is highly probative.
Let's put together two parts of what Ryan said. Ryan said that it's possible for Congress to withdraw birthright citizenship through political allegiance of any alien. He said this.
Going forward, not going backwards.
No, wait, you're saying that it would have been possible for earlier Congresses to get rid of birthright citizenship for any alien. You did say that.
I I said going forward. You said that. And
Is there
I said,
something
yes,
special about the year
going forward.
2026 that going forward only means for birthright citizenship onward? Where's that coming from?
The reason this matters, and this is very in the weeds legally.
Oh, and now he's trying to, again, run out the clock by claiming that I am implying that anything we're talking about is removing citizenship that's already been granted, right? So he's making this point that no one made, that implying that I suggested that Ryan, his interpretation would allow them to rescind citizenship on a backward-facing basis. I never suggested that, never implied it. He's just trying to run out the clock. Obvious bad faith.
All
right, so just put it past.
No. The reason you said it, so I'm going to explain it.
Again, running out the clock.
In law, there's something called reliance interests.
Who
It's one
asked?
thing for Congress
Who
to change
asked?
the
Who
law.
asked? I mean, I'm smiling because like the dude is just going on an irrelevant rant, just trying to bog us down and say random shit.
And say, in the future, we're going to limit birthright citizenship because those kids aren't born yet. They don't rely on it. This is in the future. Going back in time and taking away from citizens
but
who
that's
have lived here for a long time is clearly different.
No, that's not what I'm talking
Let me
about.
finish the point. This is why President Trump's executive order only applies going forward. He is not.
Yeah, that's
Trump dick sucking again.
Slimy, that's
to
not what I'm
take
talking
away
about.
birthright citizenship.
That's why I say it's slimy. It is slimy. I didn't say that's what Trump was doing, or that's what Ryan would say would be allowed. I'm not saying that.
From anybody who already has it, and the Supreme Court will not decide that question.
Yeah, got the
because
subs.
President
Thank you.
Trump has not asked them to.
So I'm not
literally
suggesting
part of
that the executive order, at no point did I suggest that the executive order is backward facing or imply it. What I'm saying is it's your belief that Congress could have in the 1860s defined political allegiance so as to exclude any alien, and you did say that.
I said yes, going forward.
And you're talking about 1868. That's great. That's the frame of reference I want to use. I'm applying originalism. It was totally understood by the framing generation that Chinese people of Chinese descent who are here they could not have birthright citizenship taken away from them. That is clear in the debates, in the 1816 debates. How do you square that? The two things. One, that he says that Congress, if it wanted to, could deprive birthright citizenship of any alien, including people of Chinese descent, and the fact that in the debate about the 14th Amendment, if that's what we're going through, that they said they couldn't. It's a contradiction because it's not true. He's inventing political allegiance. Jurisdiction doesn't mean political allegiance. It means the power of the state. I have jurisdiction to hear a case. I have jurisdiction, IRS has jurisdiction over your taxes. It means power. It means authority, not this loosey-goosey test where we can invent Republicans not having political allegiance. That's what his test will lead to.
Pisco's concerned about the hypothetical when, as I explained earlier, this has literally already happened. At one point, Native Americans were subject to the jurisdiction.
Again, back to the thing I already debunked, and has nothing to do with political allegiance, naturalization, not political allegiance.
Was talking about you could sue them, you could throw them in jail, but they were not qualifying for birthright citizens because they did not have sufficient political allegiance. And then in 1924, Congress in its wisdom changed that, and now they do have political allegiance because Congress made a change. And as I pointed out earlier, if you change the rules about ambassadors, that would change their birthright citizenship status as well. It's clear Congress can change these things. Pisco just doesn't like that they can, but I'm not sure why that's relevant because they've already done it.
Here's the kicker. Do all U.S. citizens have political allegiance to the United States?
Yes.
Why?
He gets just wrecked here.
Done it.
Here's the kicker. Do all U.S. citizens have political allegiance to the United States?
Yes.
Why? By virtue of what?
Pisco, you and I think many people in the audience will remember this experience.
I'll just let it play.
You turned 18, and if you're a gentleman,
Draft
you
card.
received a selective service card. You had to register for the draft, and if you didn't,
so
you could be
embarrassing.
thrown in jail.
But Ryan-
Why did you have that obligation? Because you owe complete political allegiance.
Wait a second.
So the monkeys in the audience, right? The clapping monkeys. They're just clapping because he just brought up the draft, okay? So that's what he's trying to do. I have two beautiful kids. I have two wonderful kids. Or he says it later on. But they're just clapping because he said draft. And it's like 9/11. Oh, we love our military, right? That's what he's doing right here. It's so insane. Well, just watch this. Hang on.
Card. You had to register for the draft.
If you're a
And
man,
if you didn't,
right?
you could be thrown in jail.
But Ryan-
Why did you have that obligation? Because you owe complete political allegiance
Wait a
to
second.
the United
So
States. This could not be more obvious.
absurd. It's absurd. So listen to what he just said, right? He says, complete jurisdiction by which political allegiance for all U.S. citizenship is given by virtue of your signing up for the draft card. But here,
evidence of
putting aside that there's no evidence whatsoever, no writings in the text to support this kind of intuition that political allegiance turns on your draftability, whatever. It's all nonsense. It's all ahistorical. It excludes.
Whoa.
Wait, no,
I gave you the evidence earlier.
Excuse me.
Do you not remember?
So it excludes women who don't have to sign up for the draft, and by virtue of this could be denied political allegiance by your own test. And the fact that your reading completely warps the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment applies to babies. Subject to the jurisdiction, political allegiance applies to babies. So of course it's ridiculous on your own view to think that political allegiance by dint of U.S. citizenship is granted through the draft cards if you're saying that babies are the ones who have political allegiance. And of course they haven't signed any draft selected service cards.
The political allegiance of babies obviously follows their parents.
So that's a walk back, right? So he just said it's because of their draft status. And then he's like, oh, fuck. That doesn't make any sense. And so now we're back to it follows from the parents. But then you can't make light of Wong Kim Ork, and I'm about to call him on it. So just watch.
I have two.
Haven't signed any draft selected service cards.
The political allegiance of babies obviously follows their parents. I have two beautiful girls. When they were born, their political allegiance.
Look at his fucking, that's what I say, politician. I have two beautiful girls. When they were born, like the dude is such a fucking hack.
Of babies obviously follows their parents. I have two beautiful girls. When they were born, their political allegiance was my political allegiance because they were babies. To think that this is a complicated legal question is to get lost in the.
So he's now just, it's not complicated. It's not complicated. You think it's complicated. It's not like, again, just pure fucking trying to import like intuition pumps and trying to import pageantry. I mean, like, oh my God, it's not complicated. It's not complicated, dude.
Political allegiance because they were babies. To think that this is a complicated legal
Can you explain the problem with his draft argument again? Okay, all right. So here's the problem. I'll explain it. I'm about to explain it in the fucking thing, but all right. So Ryan is trying to avoid pitfalls for results. He doesn't want to say that U.S. citizens generally are going to be able to have birthright citizenship stripped from them, from their children, okay? Because it's about their children. And so I'm pushing him and be like, well, could Congress take away political allegiance from any alien? And he's like, yes. All right. And they could take it away from American Indians, right? Yeah. Can they take it away from U.S. citizens? He's like, no. And I'm like, why can't they take political allegiance away from U.S. citizens? And he says, well, it's because you are automatically having political allegiance because when you come of age, you sign up for the selective service. You notice the problem? First, women don't have to sign up for selective service. And so at a bare minimum, his explanation would not give automatic political allegiance to half the population, that is women. And the second problem is you don't sign up for selective service until you're 18. But obviously, the 14th Amendment applies when you're born. And so having it be contingent on signing the selective service both absolutely makes a mockery of the 14th Amendment applying to babies and also excludes half the population, women. So it's a glaring contradiction. It's fucking laughable he said it, and he was totally exposed as a hack.
The political allegiance of babies, obviously.
Political allegiance by dint of U.S. and the fact that it's all whatsoever, no U.S. citizen. It's absurd. It's absurd. So listen to what he just said.
Political allegiance to the United States. This could not be more
absurd.
obvious.
It's absurd. So listen to what he just said, right? He says, complete jurisdiction by which political allegiance for all U.S. citizenship is given by virtue of your sign up for the draft card. But here,
evidence.
putting aside that there's no evidence whatsoever, no writings in the text that support this kind of intuition, that political allegiance turns on your draftability, whatever. It's all nonsense. It's all ahistorical. It excludes.
Whoa.
Wait, no,
I gave you the evidence earlier.
Excuse
Do you not remember?
So it excludes women who don't have to sign up for the draft, and by virtue of this could be denied political allegiance by your own test. And the fact that your reading completely warps the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment applies to babies, subject to the jurisdiction. Political allegiance applies to babies. So of course it's ridiculous on your own view to think that political allegiance by dint of U.S. citizenship is granted through the draft cards if you're saying that babies are the ones who have political allegiance. And of course they haven't signed any draft selected service cards.
The political allegiance of babies obviously follows their parents. I have two beautiful girls. When they were born, their political allegiance
He's a
was my
politician.
political allegiance because they were babies. To think that this is a complicated legal question is to get lost in the weeds of like the deep type of.
So then why did you say this thing about draft?
That overcomplicates things that are not.
So why did you say this? So why did you say this? I asked you the question, and why did you say this about the draft card? If all you meant to say was political allegiance tracks the parents, you didn't say that.
Because
You said draft. And now this is a walk back because he realizes that the mess he made for himself. That when he said draft card, he's excluding half the population. And he's excluding babies.
This is why I said draft card. Pisco, do you want to ask the question with a question mark earlier? And you seem to have just forgot that I said this when I was explaining the concept of complete allegiance, complete jurisdiction. I mentioned that in 1863 there were foreigners in the country, and the country.
Yeah, filibuster. There was a law about draft people in 1860s, and that makes it so I wasn't owned.
Country had to decide, could they be drafted? That was the example that was on the mind of the Congress people 3 years later. And what did they decide? They decided that only foreigners who had signed a declaration of intent and said that they owe complete political.
Right, so only people who sign to the selective service have. So I'm right. So my interpretation is correct. That on your view, it means that
allegiance to this country could be drafted. So the idea that 3 years later, the same Congress people.
Right. So your rule would mean only people who sign up have political allegiance, which is exactly what I just said, which is, of course, is preposterous. So he's acting as though this is contradicting me. It's not.
Would find this idea puzzling is laughable. Obviously, they knew what complete political allegiance was.
It didn't mean draft cards.
The law 3 years ago.
So it didn't mean you signing up for the draft, and that's the answer that you provided. That you're walking back. You're walking back because you know it's garbage. If signing up for the draft was all it took for political allegiance, where are the writings in the 14th Amendment in the 1860s that state this? They're saying Chinese people, even temporary people who are here, are citizens. They didn't say that Congress can take that away. Of course, it's absurd.
Time. Good job, guys. Good job. Really well done. All right.
And this closing, I think, is one of the, I didn't like write down. I just have ideas of what I'm going to close with. And by the way, this is also advice for Pearl Davis, just Pearly Things. Having like a speech that you're just reading off of, I don't think, unless there's like a prompter or you're reading it in like an eloquent way, I don't think it ever comes across as good in these debates than having like points and just naturally speaking them, looking at the audience. So I knew kind of where I was going. I had ideas for what to do, but I didn't like have a prepared speech that I memorized. But this, I think, is a slam dunk. I'm very proud of this closing.
Closing? Please go your first.
It's 2028. President Gavin Newsom has just been elected. Gavin Newsom comes in with a commanding majority in the Congress. They have filibuster proof or senators willing to get rid of the filibuster. The first acts they do in Congress is they say, we're going to incorporate Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. They're going to call everyone who was there on January 6th an insurrectionist. They're going to say anyone who supports people who were there on January 6th have no political allegiance to the United States. By virtue of the fact, under President Gavin Newsom's executive order and his Congress, they have now stripped by constitutional provision all political allegiance from Trump supporters. On Ryan's view, this would be not just constitutional, but normal. They could do this, that Congress could just adjust your God-given right to citizenship as given to you, I guess, by the 14th Amendment. But surely that wasn't what the framers of the 14th Amendment wanted. They couldn't have done that with the expectation that even citizens could be deprived of their political allegiance by a mere act of Congress. They wanted to settle the issue, and all the history supports that. If you actually look in the debates in the 1860s, the ratifying amendments, some of the statements are conflicting with each other. Even Ryan's going to have to grant that. But they say, yes, even temporary people who are here for short periods of time are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Of course, babies, remember, the operative subject of the 14th Amendment citizenship clause are not their parents. It's babies, right? There's no textual argument against that. All persons born, right? Parents, at the moment their child are born, aren't born too. Right? It's their kids. And of course, the kids of illegal immigrants, the kids of people who are temporarily, are subject to the powers and authorities of the government. All the Supreme Court case law supports it too. Elk versus Watkins, the case that he cites, yes, it carves out a special area for the American Indians. That makes complete sense. American Indians were in some sense considered foreign nations. They had this quasi-sovereign role in the United States, a peculiarity of American history and constitutional jurisprudence. But the English common law was predominant in Elk versus Watkins and Wong Kim Ark. Ryan's playing this trick on you. He's pretending that he wants to keep the result of Wong Kim Ark just because he can make some face-saving maneuver that trumps executive orders in compliance with it. But the important thing of the Supreme Court ruling is not just the people who are affected and what their factual circumstances are, but the reasoning of the Supreme Court. And that rested foundationally on the English rule that the Americans imported. Yes, the rules of subjecthood, the rules of the king. They imported, you can say that they didn't want to do that, you have no evidence to back that up. That's what they were doing. They were trying to correct a mistake. The mistake was Dred Scott, and the mistake was the Civil War. They didn't want the Civil War to happen again because ultimately, questions of slavery, questions of equal protection, whether all men are created equal, has to do with who's a member of our community, who's a member of the club, what does it mean to be a nation? And they wanted an administratable rule that couldn't be destroyed with the flick of a pen. Ryan's view, Ryan's interpretation, gives you no protections. It gives you the protection of political whim. That's it. And thankfully, that is not what the framers of the 14th Amendment intended, that political allegiance and pure viewpoint discrimination could dictate whether you're a citizen or not. Thank you.
And the reason I love that is, one, and I'm going to glaze myself like I have this whole debate, it casts the question in terms of you, the audience. It's not about the illegal immigrants. It's not about the anchor babies. It's about you. This is about what your fathers gave to you. The protections they provided for you. That this is a gift that we're getting from a previous generation. And what is this gift for? It's to protect against certain dangers. What kinds of dangers? Gavin Newsom. And what the Democrats want to do to you, right? You don't trust the Democrats with any of your rights, conservatives. Why would you trust them with citizenship? And that, I think, I was very proud of that. I don't spend time talking about these poor immigrants, their children, they're all, no. This is about us. It's about our relationship to each other. It's about our relationship to the state. And it's about protecting you and your children. And the gift that our framers gave us in the future after they had their mistakes, Dred Scott, the Civil War, they learned from history so we wouldn't have to go through the same stuff. And so I think that was good. I think I'm very proud of staying focused on my points. And yeah, I really had fun. I had a great time. I know I've talked shit about Ryan. I believe everything I said about Ryan in this position. I do think that he argues in bad faith, but I really do like him. And I had a really great time. And we chilled and we had fun afterwards and before. And these kinds of debates, I would have them 1,000 times because I don't mind. Because I like getting better. I like being able to be more flexible in different kinds of contexts, not just Socratically. And so for me, this was a lot of fun. It was challenging, and I really appreciated the support of everybody. I'm going to let him have his speech as well. And then the coup de grace is the slavery example here, where it's like, I mean, it's just crazy. So we'll get to that. And then unfortunately, my throat is, you can tell I'm sick. My throat is really probably going to be shot by the end of that. We'll get to the other stuff. And then maybe the Destiny conversation.
All right, well done. 5 minutes. You're closing, right?
How can you simultaneously like him and think he's bad faith? I like Rob Noor, so I don't know. It happens.
In law, we have a saying when if you're right on the law, argue the law. If you're right on the facts, argue the facts. If you're right on neither, pound the table. Peace goes pounding the table right now. You know, if you're right on the law, argue the law. If you're right
and by the way, like, he was going to say this no matter what, right? He always says this whenever we have a debate. It's so corny, dude. Stop being a cliche. And look, I know exactly where he's going. Look at my hand, pound the table.
5 minutes. You're closing, right?
In law, we have a saying where if you're right on the law, argue the law. If you're right on the facts, argue the facts. If you're right on neither, pound the table. He's goes pounding the table right now. You notice how often he accuses me of something as if I have something to do with what the Supreme Court's going to do. But it's not up to me. It's up to the law and it's up to the justices. So none of that matters at all.
Well, I mean, this is I don't matter at all. Who am I debating, asshole? Who am I debating? I'm debating you and your interpretation. Well, it's just ramble. It's fucking nonsense.
Also notice that Pisco makes a lot of statements about what the history is, but he can't quote it and can't recite it for you.
Oh, because I don't want to bring up quotes. This is a fucking audience of laymen. Oh, look at my fucking quotes. I fucking brought the quotes. No, I wanted to dumb it down, dude.
I can't. Pisco makes a lot of
I can quote directly. I printed this out, and so I'm right. I can.
arguments about the fact that Congress couldn't do something, even though I pointed out to him multiple times that they already did. His arguments just don't make sense. But it's more fundamental than that. Let me just explain to you how clear this history is. On April 9th, 1866, the Congress of the United States, the 39th Congress, passed the Civil Rights Act, and it said the following: all persons born in the United States and not subject to any foreign power.
Right. Different language than the language we adopted in the 14th Amendment. So automatically fucking cooked, right? Different language in the 1866 Civil Rights Act. Automatically cooked, right? Well, should we read into the different language? But putting that aside, even if we did say the Civil Rights Act of 1866, that interpretation is controlling, it's not. But even if we did, it's not inconsistent. Again, subject to any foreign power can just mean subject in the way we mean subject to the jurisdiction, right? It's just the inverse of subject to the jurisdiction of the United States is not subject to the jurisdiction of another country. Now, in point of fact, I think you can concurrently be subject to jurisdiction of different countries. I think that is not just conceptually possible, but actually true in different cases. So I actually don't agree that they're extensively the same thing. That is to say that just because you're subject to the jurisdiction of one country means that you're not of another country. I do think it's conceptually possible to be subject to multiple. But there's no inherent contradiction between the 1866 text and the 14th Amendment, and they're different words, right? One is subject to the jurisdiction thereof of the United States, and other is not subject to any foreign power. So then there's no necessary contradiction between those two interpretations. And again, you know, he wants to claim that as a huge dunk. I'm prepared for that. I know it, but it, again, doesn't prove his point.
Excluding Indians not taxed are hereby declared citizens of the United States. If you were subject to a foreign power, if you were a foreign citizen, you did not get birthright citizenship.
If you were a foreign citizen, you didn't get birthright citizenship? Wong Kim Ark, right? The case you say had the right outcome, but the wrong reasoning, then you just lose, right? Because he got citizenship.
Then, on June 13, 1866, 2 months later, the same Congress passed the 14th Amendment and sent it to the states for ratification.
With different language, not subject to any foreign power, but subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Different language.
But they drafted it 2 months after they drafted that language. Pisco would have you believe they completely changed their mind, and now you get universal birthright.
No, I mean, there's no contradiction, as I said.
In
I'll let
2
it play, I'm
months,
sorry.
without saying anything about it. It's completely implausible. It's also contradictory to what they actually...
But even if we did go with that, why would they write different words then, Ryan? Why would they write different words? You get me? Why would they not use the same words? Explain that one.
Said during the debates on the 14th Amendment, Senator Howard, the man who introduced the...
He's like, on the one hand, like, obviously they meant the same thing as the Civil Rights Act. They were so close in times to the Civil Rights Act of 1866. I've already explained it's not a contradiction, but even if it were, why wouldn't we read into the fact that they used different language given that it was written so close to it, right? Presumably, all else equal, if they meant the same thing, they would use the same language.
Amendment said, the amendment which I have offered is simply declaratory of what I regard as the law of the land already. And he would know what the law of the land already was.
English common law,
it 2
right?
months ago.
That's why I'm saying the rule the rule that was then existing was the common law. This was recognized by all the different state courts. That was the predominating rule. That's why I do this expression and have my hand out. Yes, exactly. That proves my point.
And he would know what the law of the land already was because he passed it 2 months ago. It's probably still on his mind since he just did it. Not only that, the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which has the language that just proves I'm right about this, didn't go away.
The language that's different than the 14th Amendment, that proves I'm right, okay?
After the 14th Amendment. If it was contradictory to it, as PISCO claims, it would be abolished.
As PISCO claims, did I make any reference to the Civil Rights Act of 1866 in any of my fucking, anything I said? Did I even mention the 1866 Act? Like, he's now saying that I claimed that the 14th Amendment is contradictory to the Civil Rights Act of 1866. He's claiming that. But I didn't say anything about that.
The 14th Amendment, or at least altered. But in fact, in 1870, Congress reenacted it in the Enforcement Acts. And it was good law for 70 years until it was changed. Clearly, Congress was doing what is obvious. They were constitutionalizing the rule they articulated in 1866 that you have to have complete jurisdiction, meaning political allegiance. This is totally clear on the evidence. It's totally clear on the scholarship of the era. In fact, Thomas Cooley, the leading constitutional scholar of his era in 1880, wrote that the 14th Amendment required full and complete jurisdiction to which citizens generally are subject, and not any qualified and partial jurisdiction such as may consist with allegiance to some other government. If you had allegiance to another government, you did not have complete allegiance to this country.
Like Wonka Mark.
And as a result, you did not qualify for birthright citizenship. The universal birthright citizenship argument is an invention of the recent past. And I will obviously
in the 1890s, got it.
Concede, because it's just true, that our government has been doing it for a long time. But that's not the question. The question is, are we constitutionally required to do it? And we are not.
All right. Great job again, both of you guys. All right, so a couple of notes here. So for everyone who's at home, who's watching on the streamright.com, all right, I see one over here. Is your question for Ryan or for Pisco?
So that's Nick. That's Kyla's husband.
Let me put it this way. Okay, so come and line up on this side, right there. There's a mic right here, stand right here. Let me get one for, who has a question for Pisco? Okay, I can see the hand on the other side of the camera, so come on to this side. Or I guess right behind me, sorry, apologize.
And I'm very happy with the question that Nick asks, just heads up.
All right, let's get that question for Ryan first.
And Nick is a conservative, by the way.
Hey, what's going on?
Doing good. So I have a little bit, I think, great arguments from you, great arguments from Pisco, but I feel like there's a little bit of an idea supplied by your argument, which is that, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, that basically the children are responsible for the sins of their fathers when they...
That means it got through, okay? That means it got through, right? My focus, and I didn't plant Nick with this question. I didn't tell him beforehand I was going to say this, so this is not a plant. I didn't know that he was going to raise his hand. Nick is conservative. Would be probably considered more left-wing in American context, but in general, conservative. And it got through. And he's not who I'm referencing as someone who came up to me, by the way. I'm not talking about Nick. I'm talking about other conservatives, like legit, like very, very conservative types. Just a heads up. But Nick, it got through that it's about the children, not the parents. And the minute I heard that, I was like, okay, good.
By your argument, which is that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, that basically the children are responsible for the sins of their fathers when they come into America, which that idea, it seems kind of like an old world idea and something that we don't apply to people in America. We have these dreams of like individual liberty, and the idea that a child would be punished because of the actions of their parents such that they couldn't even be granted citizenship in the country. That seems very old-minded to me. So I guess what would you suggest that?
It's actually the opposite priority. Like if you think about
Now, this question is, again, more like policy, more like philosophical. But I don't care, right? And the answer kind of here like doesn't matter or whatever for the legal analysis. And heads up, this guy's question is also similar to that, which goes to show that, yeah, what people care more about is the philosophy, the average person. And so I get that. I get that for sure. But, it does make me happy that he went to the children point.
English common law rule that Pisco was talking about. It was a rule of subjecthood. The leading scholar of that area is named Blackstone. He wrote 4 volumes on this. He doesn't mention the word citizenship once because you weren't citizens in England. You were subjects to a feudal lord. So when America rejected this proposition, it's far from the sins of the father. What we're saying is we have a social compact. That's why the Declaration of
Independence it's Kyla's husband.
Governed by the consent of the governed, right? And to be part of a social compact, the people have to let you in. So the question is not really the sins of the father. It's more if somebody is breaking the social compact on purpose, are we required constitutionally to reward them? And I think the answer is no for all the reasons I described.
Okay.
again, not really addressing it. It's like, okay, reward them. That's presupposing the reward is to the parents. That's presupposing it, right? It's begging the question.
Can I do one?
Sure, go ahead.
One final thing. I guess even this idea, this term social compact, right? I think you make a delineation between a social compact and a social contract for a reason. And this idea of a social compact that everyone is forced into, this feels like a sort of collectivism, which seems antithetical to the American project to me.
I mean, I like that his head is more philosophical. I don't think it's collectivism, but I do appreciate that he's expressing like a kind of philosophical, political desire, like to engage on that level. It's not what the debate's about, but I appreciate that that's what most people care about.
No, I don't think that's collectivism. I think all just
a social compact, it must be, right?
Government must be social compact, because the only way that you can have power over people justly is through their consent. So when people consent to be governed, and in fact when they consent to be governed, that's actually what complete jurisdiction, complete political allegiance is. That comes with responsibilities, like the draft, like the fact that you could be charged with treason. But that's not collectivism, that's justice.
All right, yeah, I'll give it there. I mean, great job for you guys. Yeah.
Nice job. All right, so go ahead. Your question's for Pisco, correct?
Hey, Pisco, good. I'm a Covert Patriot on X. So my question is, why are you obviously like blatantly ignoring the fact that the people, that there are, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people, I don't know the exact numbers, that they have no interest in being American citizens. They don't share any of American values. They have no interest in actually living here, residing here, living by our Constitution. And they're obviously just doing this to exploit that, whatever, you want to call it, whether it's a loophole or just like your idea of universal, the universal idea that, if you're born here, you're a citizen. Why do you just ignore all that?
I don't ignore it. I think that the values that you bring up, that a lot of people are pointing out, that certain people who cross the border don't seem to share from your perspective, things like, properly integrating into our societies. The very fact that there's so much disagreement about what that means and what that entails is that any
So my point here is the fact that I'm not ignoring it, right? Part of my rationale is that disagreements on issues like whether or not they're representing our values, all those are things that could divide us. And the purpose of the amendment was to settle an issue and not to be susceptible to these kinds of like disagreements on policy or disagreements on, integration and what values, what they are, right? Who's even, right? Like the disagreement in the context of the Civil War was even greater. It's about whether we can own people, right? And we didn't want to have such vast disagreements about American values dictate basic membership in the club. And so I'm not ignoring it. It's feeding into the rationale as to why the rule ought be universal in the way in which it was meant to be, but obviously not totally universal in the way that Ryan is implying.
Test that turns on subjective preferences regarding whether or not someone has fully assimilated or things like that can't have been what the framers of the Constitution wanted when they set a rule at a time when our country was more divided. The Civil War was a time when we were more at each other's throats, hundreds of thousands of people, brother against brother. So that's a policy disagreement or policy argument that doesn't resolve the fundamental question. There are a lot of constitutional provisions that people can abuse. People can abuse, I guess their due process rights. You've heard this, right? That, why do we give these people due process when we come into the, Kilmar Abrego Garcia? And people say, well, he came here illegally. Why should he get the benefit of the due process clause? People abuse, some might say, the right against self-incrimination. Why do we protect people who plead the fifth? Right? These are criminals. We should force them to say what actually happened on pain of perjury. But the reason why sometimes strong constitutional provisions will unfortunately get in some bad actors is if we don't have that level of robustness, even when there are policy reasons against it, it undermines all of our protections, the good people. And the test he just gave you, that is of political allegiance, that is the whim and discretion of the people in Congress. Who trusts Congress here? Raise your hand. Not a single hand. Not a single hand. So yes, this can be abused by people. I don't doubt that. I don't deny it. But the reason we have it is so that the government, so we're not bootlicking shills, at the discretion of the government to decide these most foundational questions.
Can I get a quick follow-up? So what would you do then to minimize that? People that are just obviously exploiting it, that have no interest in living here and living as Americans?
I think Trump has moved the needle in terms of conversations about border security, even as a lib dem, fucking token lib. I'm not going to deny that. And everyone at least says now, we need to have tight border security. It's, the situation under Joe Biden was untenable, these kinds of talking points. So with respect to people like overstaying, people abusing the system, the answer your political aisle has provided. Border security, border protection. But what you're not realizing sometimes when we have these different disagreements on areas of rights, whether it's the First Amendment, or you guys know the Second Amendment, when you start to make a little loophole for the Second Amendment, no assault rifles. Well, what does that mean? Can they just define assault rifle to mean anything they want? Can they just define the Second Amendment that like arm just means whatever existed then? No. Yes, sometimes these rights will overprotect. The solution is, unfortunately, other policy decisions that don't infringe on the right.
Prime. Thank you, Prime.
No. Thank you.
All right, now this is the coup de grace you're about to see. Thank you, Prime Kai. Shout out, Prime Kai. Great panels, good times, great oldies, Q105. All right, so folks, this is a beautiful, beautiful moment, and you're going to see Ryan squirm, and how I love this moment. And thank you, Ben Swan, for the alley-oop. This is Mwah, chef's kiss. And then we'll probably be done. Sorry.
It's a good try, though. Good try.
I have such a good one.
So I actually have one question for each of you guys, real quick. Ryan, you made a comment earlier. I just need you to clarify it. I was trying to understand it. You were talking about the difference between someone who comes here and someone who is taken here, and you were trying to make a distinction between that. I didn't understand the point. What was this point?
So Pisco had made the argument that slaves who were illegally imported would be denied birthright citizenship under this rule in a hypothetical world where historically the dates lined up, which they don't. And the distinction that I drew there is that there is a difference in terms of analyzing the allegiance someone has to the country between a situation where the first act of that person is to violate our laws. If they cross the...
I'm smelling blood in the water right now. I can smell the weakness in how, first of all, his body language and his like word salad answer here. I know where I'm going, and that's why I'm happy.
Border illegally, and that's the first thing they do on purpose. That is somewhat different than someone being taken.
That is somewhat different, right? These are weasel words, which I'm just like a shark right now. I'm like, I know where I'm going.
Against their will. And I don't think it's weird for the law to treat those situations differently.
Weird.
But just real quick, in that case, are you saying that the law would say if you're taken here, you get birthright
You
citizenship?
get political allegiance.
I think probably
And the fact that Ben is asking to clarify, I'm like, okay, something is not making sense in Ben's mind. Let me make the point even clearer.
it would, but that would turn a little bit on
A little bit sort of weird, different. I'm like, oh shit, I got him.
Juan King Art case that we didn't get into a lot.
that you
in
want to
this
overturn.
situation. The question would be whether the person has complete political allegiance to this country, which in the case of, for example, the freed slaves was obvious because it was like 5 generations deep. But in the
5
case where
generations deep, right? And so I'm like, oh, I got this motherfucker because I know something he doesn't.
somebody renounces it and they say, no, bring me home, that might be obviously the other way. I think it probably would be a case-by-case analysis rather than a...
I can't hold it in. I can't hold it in.
Pisco's example was about slaves that were imported illegally and then were not freed for generations.
No, it's not. And this is such a great question that you asked because it means he must be wrong. There's a whole debate right there. And I'll tell you why. How can it be that a slave taken from part of Africa against his will, brought to the United States of America against his will, and he's off on the timing. Lincoln executed a slave importer in 1862. Look it up. They were importing slaves illegally for years. How can it be that an illegally imported slave against his will has political allegiance to the United States? It is absurd. All of you must reject it. That's the debate right there. An illegally imported slave brought into the country, of course, does not have political allegiance to the United States in the way you described. That would be an absurdity. That's the whole debate.
Think about the actual situation he's describing. This isn't a world where there's planes. This is a...
It's not a world where there's planes. Who cares? Who cares?
very dangerous ocean journey.
Very dangerous ocean journey. What?
Most people didn't survive it. Imagine a situation where this person is abducted, taken against their will, then
Now they have political allegiance. By the way, have you heard of the Darien Gap? Have you heard of human trafficking in the modern era? Oh, I was like, fuck, this is
they
good.
are freed by the laws of this country. They choose not to go back home because it's a long trip and they could die. And they say, yeah, I'd like to be American. That doesn't seem to me to be the same situation.
It doesn't seem to be the same situation, or is it what is entailed by your argument that people who were illegally brought to this country against their will, yet not in generations, have political allegiance to the country?
As somebody who is breaking our laws on purpose.
Do they have political
to
allegiance?
us.
Do
And
they
I
have
don't-
political allegiance?
Pisco, I gave you the
Okay,
answer
okay,
earlier.
I know you didn't. You fucking liar.
No,
Declaration of
let me
intent.
call time. I apologize. I was
The
just
oh, and he bails him out. He bails him out. He bails him out. Oh, and he knew he was cooked. Fucking begging for that bell.
trying to ask a question.
You're interested. Yeah,
This is-
that
but
was a
it's
great
When Pisco
question.
and I talk, this is how it
It's
goes
good. No,
every
no,
time.
it's good.
You
You
should
guys
see
did
us
great.
have coffee. It's a fucking nightmare.
All right, folks. Okay. Anyway, absolute win. He can have his fake win with the bag of audience voting. Hey, Ryan, when we had this conversation, when we had the build up and the Rob Noor kind of like style discussion on Trump versus United States, which I won as well. I told you I knew it was going to be a rigged vote. You can see me say it's going to be a rigged vote. It was a rigged vote, but you can take it. I want you because I know you know how cooked you were. And it's so funny to watch you go and Ted Cruz and like all the replies. Look at Pisco. Like, dude, you're a fucking lol cow in this debate. I did have a lot of fun with Brian. It was seriously like, besides the sliminess in the debate, great time. But I love this debate. I would have it again. I want to do more of these shows. I was very impressed with myself. I loved that I was able to do it in a different scene, and I appreciate all the support you guys gave. I want to say tomorrow, assuming that I'm in good health, which I think it will be, we'll do the WIC thing in the afternoon. I might do something in the morning if I'm feeling up to it. reviewing the Anna versus Pearl thing, and then maybe the Destiny stream. But yeah, that's it. And I love you guys very much. I have to go. I'm sick, dude. I'm very sick. But love you guys. Bye.